It is now 9:02 on August 9th. Madam Clerk, can we have roll call, please?
Honorable Steve Green?
Here.
Honorable Sandra Whitehead?
Here.
Honorable Kathy Clark?
Here.
Honorable Ralph Hessler?
Here.
Honorable Joshua Frankel?
Present.
We have a quorum. Thank you. Please join me in 15 seconds of silent meditation. Thank you. May I approach the mic and lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Justice for all.
Where's Josh? Is he back over in the south part of the United States? Or?
Thank you. Next item is number 4, approval of the agenda. I would like, with my fellow commissioners' acceptance, to move, since Commissioner Clark is wearing a boot on her foot, i.e. a broken foot, and she has someplace to go, so I'm going to take a look at it. I'd like to move under new business number 6 to become number 5, and number 5 to become number 6. Otherwise, the agenda will remain the same. That's under I, new business. I will stand for a motion for approval of the agenda, please.
Mayor, so moved.
I have a motion. I need a second.
I second that motion.
I have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you. The next item is comments from the public. We have a 3-minute rule. Please come forward. Address the commission. If you have anything that you want to become a permanent part of the record of this meeting, please put it in the black box next to the microphone. And I would ask you, if you have any electronic devices on you, to please shut them off so they won't be disruptive to the speaker. Floor is open for that microphone.
Hello, Commission. My name is Alice Hutchins, and I just wanted to say that I was in support of the Women's Recovery Program. I don't know how that's going to take place or where it would take place, but we're a community that deeply cares about each other and cares about family. We call ourselves a healing community, and I would just like to see action put behind those words rather than just good thoughts or feelings. So I have no concrete, it should go forward this way, but just as a citizen, I wanted to say that I thought that was a great thing for our community, and I would love this body of leaders to be behind it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Commissioner Fletcher. Pleasure to have you here.
My name is Sherry Fletcher, and I'm here to speak regarding the animal shelter. And to date, there has been a collaboration between the county and the city, and I know that Mr. Fuentes is up on top of this, and we certainly support that, and we are hoping that we can move forward. We also recognize that there is an advisory board, an ad hoc advisory board, but that is exactly what that is, an advisory board. When it gets down to actually looking at the facility and looking at the laws that go into that, that is the city's responsibility. And I've checked with that, and to date, the county has submitted, the city has submitted $72,000 in the project. So I support that. I can't speak for my fellow commissioners because I am a county commissioner, but definitely support that moving forward so that we have a safe place for our animals. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fletcher.
Diane Lombardo, Truth or Consequences. Again, I want to talk about the Animal Shelter Board. First off, Eliana has put in her article that doubts about the city being able to do this. She brings up the past. We're in a new century, but a lot of people have come to me about it, and I tell them We're going to get a board. We are going to get a board to make sure nothing like that happens again. However, we would like a board with a little bit of authority. There are reasons for that. We want to have the shelter manager come to the once a month meetings with stats for 501c purposes, for also looking at live releases and how we can build better strategies to reach close to a no-kill, which is 90% no-kill. We're talking live beings here, folks. This isn't the utility board. This isn't the zoning board. We need people who can say, this is wrong, we got to change it, just because we need to keep these poor animals who are in the shelter through no fault of their own. Shelter managers, not saying that this one will do it or the next one, have made really bad mistakes. Case in point, too recent, close to home, Bernalillo, the shelter manager up there, adopting out aggressive dogs. No one there to look over her and say, you can't do this. Close to Homicida, just like this past year, basically the shelter manager turned into a hoarder and was not putting animals down. In the end, when she stepped down, it was a matter of mass slaughter down there, not a dry eye. I can only imagine what those shelter workers were going through, having been through something like that myself. Harrisburg, I worked there. Preventable disease for cats. Shelter manager wouldn't get the vaccine. We ended up going cage to cage, putting down all these beautiful cats because they had a respiratory illness that was preventable by a shot on intake. The board in Harrisburg overrode her, and we got those shots. You know, compassion fatigue for the shelter manager. She needs somebody, or he needs somebody to go to who knows what's going on with rescue, who knows how hard these decisions are. So we are asking for a board with some authority to help with all these issues. And remember, they are living beings.
Thank you.
Good morning, Leah Leadis, Truth or Consequences, 507 McAdoo. I just want to take an opportunity to introduce somebody to the commission today during this 3-minute public speaking. On July 19th, we had a severe storm come through our city, which ultimately resulted in taking down our 100-foot communications tower for the police department and various public services. We called our radio vendor that night, and as of that night, they started putting together a crew. The next morning, they sent a work crew here that not only repaired and got all the radios up and running, also dismantled and took apart that tower that had come down. Frank Longoria, that's sitting over here to my left, he's the owner of RTC Communications. They've been in business for over 20 years. They serve a great portion of New Mexico and Texas in the communication services, and I just want to publicly thank them and their company for their response and immediate action. The only antenna that actually survived that storm was utilities department, and they were able to come with some parts that they had on stock from the information they had received the night before, and got everything up and running again. So I want to thank you, Mr. Longoria, and your crew for the outstanding work and the fast response that they gave the city of Truth or Consequences. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to address the commission? Mr. Fenn?
Good morning, Commissioners. Ron Fenn, 316 North Foch. Mr. Mayor, on the in July, found an article in the newspaper about your award for the Rotary Club. This is not really an award, it's a receipt for a $1,000 donation. So, and as my wife gives out several times that much every year and doesn't get her picture in the paper, it's, you know, kind of kind of pointless. But what it did do is it brought to my attention the Rotary, and I did some researching. And as a consequence, I have mailed out 7 invoices for repayment of dues that were illegally paid for out of city coffers. The first is Juan Fuentes, $3,665 in dues for the Rotary Club. James Morgan, $1,818 in dues. Lee Jack Alvarez, Chief of Police, $1,437. Renee Canton, $1,135. Russ Peterson, $1,469. Chief Patrick Gallagher, $1,155. And last but not least, Jaime Aguilera, $1,539. There were some others, but there were no names attached to them, and I haven't calculated who they are yet. This is unreasonable. This is not correct. This is the people's money. The Rotary is a private organization. It is a social and business organization. And whether or not you do some little good, it doesn't matter. This is not due to be paid for by the citizens of this community, me for one. And I believe that this money needs to be returned to the city, and it needs to be done in a prompt manner. And it will be pursued further if that money has not been returned. Thank you very much.
Sophia Perone, Truth or Consequences. I'd like to discuss a few things that have been discussed recently at the meetings. Last meeting, the mayor went on and on and on about recusal and how appropriate it is to recuse oneself. Well, the mayor votes every time on a Main Street money, and he never recuses himself. Commissioner Frankel recuses himself. He's on the board. Now, at the last meeting where we talked about a cell phone tower, Commissioner Clark, who lived across the street from the cell phone tower, forgot to recuse herself and forgot to tell everybody that she owned property across from the cell phone tower. And I guess the attorney for the cell phone tower people got her to recuse herself because she didn't vote in the final discussion. Then, last week, Mr. Heschler, who works for the Spaceport America full-time for Fiore Industries, talks about conflict of interest. He voted in February 28th for a memorandum of understanding with the Spaceport and with Spaceport Tours that are all bankrupt and gone, and did not recuse himself when he's a direct employee of Spaceport America. Now, there's no reason to even turn this into anybody, because they'll just tell you to redo the meeting. And they're going to have to redo the meeting anyway, because there's nobody giving Spaceport Tours. There's false information all over the internet. On Sunday, I popped into the Spaceport Visitor Center, and I walked in behind a couple, and the big empty space with 2 what they call exhibits was open. There were about 4 stools there, benches, and 2 exhibits. The lights were off, and the folks in front of me were wandering in. And I said, "What do you think?" They said, "Well," I could hear their German accent. And I said, "Did you try to see the spaceport?" They said, "Yes, we did. We contacted everyone. No one got back to us." They came all the way from Germany. Some gentleman there who's got a warrant out for his arrest in Mississippi is the greeter, and he told them there would be tours in 2 weeks. Now, if somebody's getting hired, please tell us. We want to make sure you do everything legally and properly. So people are coming, and they're getting screwed by TRC, and it makes us look really, really bad. And P.S., The drone summit is canceled till 2018 because you dropped the ball.
Anyone else like to address the commission?
Good morning, Carol Wheeler, Corbett Street, Truth or Consequences. And this was a surprise. I don't know if you've all seen it, but thank you very much. It's going to go in our display case as it is. That's great. A very brief comment. Thanks to the weather cooling off, thanks to vacations being over, so there are some volunteers around, and thanks for grandbabies, moms going back to college so that volunteers can stay in Tier C and help with the dog park. I do have a current action plan for the dog park. If we have any more rain, the weeds are going to be taller than the fence posts, and we won't have to cut the fence posts down. We'll just keep the weeds. Anyhow, just for your information, there are things in the work, and at the next meeting, I truly believe I'll have some good news for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Ted Kozdrasky from Elephant Butte, and I came to support the, Phyllis Mecca's full support for her recovery program, and I would like to see this program implemented and be successful. And since I've worked with these type of people before, what I would like to see is the Commissioners also support companies like CMAC and other companies that could come in, because once these people are rehabilitated, they're going to need jobs so they don't get back in the same rut that they are before they get rehabilitated. So I appreciate the effort that you can give these people Phyllis her permits that she needs, and I would also hope that you could support companies like CMAC to come in and provide jobs for these people once they are rehabilitated. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Going once, going twice. Thank you very much for your comments. The next item is D, response to public comments. Are there any?
Mayor?
I would like to respond to Mr. Fenn, please.
Okay, Commissioner Frankel?
I'd like to go on record as stating that I am a Rotary member, and I do pay all of my own dues out of my own pocket.
Thank you. Commissioner Clark?
Mr. Fenn, I don't know the answer to the dues and subscriptions category, but I'm very grateful that you brought it up, and I'm sure that somebody will be looking into that. Chief, thank you very much for pointing out RTC. I know how incredibly important it was to get that tower back up for our community, and thank you for being so quick on your response. That's it, Mayor, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, any response over here on your side? I'd like to respond to a couple things. Ms. Hutchins, I hope I pronounced your name right. Well said. Thank you. Ms. Lombardo, I agree with you that there might be a time when an advisory board would be advisable to have, as we have other advisory boards, the operable word here is advisory. This position is a staff position, and they will report, I'm going to make an assumption, to the chief. That would be the direct person. And therefore, I think it sends mixed messages where you have someone who is on staff who reports to their superior, but also is given orders and instructions by a volunteer board. I think that can be very detrimental, and I think it can be very confusing for the staff member. That said, we certainly, I believe, would want to capture the passion and the knowledge that you and your fellow like people would bring to an advisory board, and I would just like to suggest that maybe let's give this person an opportunity to get this shelter up and running, and then call for people who are interested in signing up for the advisory board, and then come up with some format, when you'll meet, how you'll meet, et cetera, et cetera. But I think, and this is just me speaking, I am not speaking for the commission, I'm not speaking for Manager Fuentes, and I'm not speaking for the chief. I think it's going to be a non-starter if you want to have certain control over a city employee. I don't think that's ever happened in the past, and I don't think now's the time to break ground on that one. So that's my comments on that. In relationship to the Rotary, I think it's money well spent, actually. We have had in subscriptions and membership fees, as long as I've been serving this community, in our budget. Mr. Fuentes, whoever it is, as a president of Rotary, now I believe it's County Manager Swingle, who's the president of Rotary, travels around the state doing good work and getting the word out about Truth or Consequences. I think it's a valuable organization here in our community. And as we support other nonprofits on subrecipient grants that do good deeds, I see no reason why we should not continue to do this. That's just my opinion on that. Thank you very much. The next item I will need for a motion for approval of the consent calendar, please.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the consent calendar, which consists of E1, City Commission regular minutes, June 14, 2017, E2, City Commission regular minutes, July 12, 2017, E3, Golf Course Advisory Board minutes, May 2nd, June 7th, and July 5th, 2017, and E4, Accounts Payable for July 2017.
Thank you. I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead. I need a second.
Second, Mayor.
I have a second by Commissioner Hashler. Any comments on what is before us? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carries unanimously. The next item is going to be presented by Tracy Burnett. We're going to have a public hearing. Basically, it's about our infrastructure capital improvement plan, which Tracy, I'm quite sure, will explain it. And then you'll have commissioners will have an opportunity to ask questions and participate, and then we'll open it up to the public as well.
Good morning, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and Commissioners. We're here today to discuss the Infrastructure Capital Improvement Plan. What is the ICIP? The ICIP is a local infrastructure capital improvement plan that establishes planning priorities for anticipated capital projects. It covers a 5-year period. This year's would be 2019 to 2023. And we do develop this annually. It's reviewed and then adopted by resolution. The ICIP is required by some funding sources as well. So infrastructure refers to the fundamental facilities and the systems serving our city as well as other counties and areas. For us, types of infrastructures would be the roads, water supply, wastewater treatment, electrical grids, telecommunications, gas, and solid waste. In order to develop the local infrastructure capital improvement plan, we would ask that we ID all the projects, our new and current inventory, and then we would prioritize those within the plan. Available funding sources would be our legislative capital outlay, state appropriations, our CDBG, USDA, Colonias, Water Trust Board, New Mexico Finance Authority, our Aging and Long-Term Services, the LGRF, our NMDOT, and then, of course, private placement financing. Currently funded right now under our ICIP projects is our animal shelter, the electric feeder upgrades, our veterans wall, wastewater treatment plant upgrades, airport fuel farm, electrical pole replacement, our new hospital expansion, Sims Road rehab, and the Broadway sidewalk project. All of those items have been funded and they were listed on the ICIP. Current funding in progress for some of our projects on the ICIP would be our law enforcement complex, water and electric meter AMRs, and Cook Street water treatment through USDA. Before you and in your agenda packet is a draft of our ICIP projects. This is carried over from last year, and we're just using this as a reference for editing, re-ranking, deleting, and adding. That's it there.
Mr. Mayor, if I might just add some additional comments to Tracy's presentation. So the preliminary, this is a public hearing for members of the public to kind of express their opinions on existing projects as well as any new projects they would like to see the commission staff move forward on. So what you see here, as Tracy mentioned, this is just to start the discussion and the dialogue. This is a system that is updated every year by DFA. So all the municipalities are required to kind of move forward the previous projects, and so they're not in any particular ranking or prioritized or identified. As you can see, some of these projects we have already been addressing, like the animal shelter, wastewater treatment plant renovation, and I believe that is the final phase, phase 3 of the wastewater treatment plant. We have already funded phase 1, 2, and the 2A and 2B phases, which is the majority of what it needed to be done there. And we are looking at a Cook Street treatment facility project. The airport fuel farm, that project has already been funded, and we're still waiting on just the paperwork for the final phase, but we're optimistic we're going to be able to get that done. As you can see in the list, you have the regional detention center. What I'd like to do, let me just, because it might be a little bit too small of a font for the members of the public to kind of see what we're looking at here. So let me just bring it up a little bit bigger for the benefit of the public. The Regional Detention Center, again, I know that was a project that we were collaborating with the county. I'm not sure if that's still a high priority on that. Construction and demolition landfill, that still seems to be a priority for members of the community. We are currently doing some electrical main feeders upgrades, storm drainage improvements in the downtown area. That still is a topic of top priority. There is one important note that in regards to both roads and road improvements, and in this case storm drainage, I believe now one of the requirements under the ICIP guidelines is that you have to specifically identify the road.
Correct, project specific.
Where in the past we were used to say just community-wide sidewalks or community road rehab. Now they really want to get specific and say which road do you want to go after. So again, as we go through these projects or we identify new projects, we really want to start identifying the specific roads. The regional safety complex, again, that's on the ICIP, and it's before the commission later on today for consideration and financing of that project. We have water line replacement, which we've been talking a lot about. We community-wide storm drainage, separate from the downtown. The pole replacement program that we see here, the staff in the electric division, Bo is present. I know Bo and his crew are replacing some of the much-needed poles out there in the system. So that's being done in-house, some of that. The same with some capacitor upgrades, water tank repair, water well north. It still remains in our ICIP. ADA restrooms for Amijo Park. Some of these may or may not apply anymore, but again, they're projects that have been there for previous ICIPs. And we have the senior citizens complex, and that is a project I know we talked about providing additional space for senior activities and for use. We have the new and upgraded circuit switches for the electric system. Enclosed replacement at substation, I guess battery, I'm not sure what that is, Bo, but do you know what that is? Battery. Oh, battery, okay, so that should be battery and enclosure replacement, okay. Effluent water to cemetery, that still remains a priority to try to conserve our water at the cemetery, but again, it's been on the list for our ICIP. Citywide sidewalks and signage, that remains an issue. Library expansion, dog park, as Ms. Wheeler pointed out, she's working on that project, so that might come off already since, we've already way underway on that project. Hospital expansion, same thing. That's already been funded. Now it's just construction is underway, so that probably could come off as well. New City Hall and Commission Chambers, that's way down the list. Citywide broadband, Civic Center improvements. Now that we have a new person that will be joining us, the tourism director who will oversee the Civic Center, will be coming back with more specifics on what improvements need to be made. And of course, the multi-purpose recreation complex continues to be a priority at the Luis Armijo Sports Complex. So these are some of the projects that have been on the list for a number of years. We just carry them over. But again, it's an opportunity right now for the public to chime in on what projects either they'd like to see added, or they see there's no longer a need to have it deleted, and have the commissioners kind of chime in on that. The process is that this will come back. This is just a public hearing. It will come back to the city commission, I believe, at the next meeting.
Correct.
It has to be adopted by resolution, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then with that, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, Tracy and I will stand for any questions.
Okay. Commissioners, anyone have any questions? Commissioner Clark?
Tracy, I think that, just personally, after what's happened with all of the rains in our community the last month, that we should be really putting a lot of focus on the water delivery system. And I don't know if we haven't had this conversation for a while, but the water well, the North Water Well, is part of that delivery system for our community. And so I think that that needs to be addressed. I'm curious about the Civic Center improvement. I know that when we passed that 1% convention tax, that's supposed to be part of that monies for this.
That's correct.
So we're not necessarily looking all for ICIP money. Part of it is funded by the taxes that we've charged to our hospitality industry. Storm drain, I'd ask you probably this, Manager Fuentes, is there was a possibility we could have put storm drains in downtown in 1995. And unfortunately, the City Commission at the time had not put in a request to have storm drains done when we repaved the downtown. And I think they're all kind of simultaneous. But when we're looking at storm drains, I have a couple of concerns. If we're going to do storm draining, it means that we're taking part of the downtown roads apart.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to do that, we should be replacing water lines at the same time. We should be putting in lines for, communication, and possibly, I don't know, I think the sewer lines are in the alley, so that's not an issue, but I think we need to look at the combining all of those together, not just one apart from the other. And the other concern I have is about storm drains, and this is a conversation I had with somebody else who has a business downtown, as we saw Sutter Miller, and I don't know if you know who Sutter Miller is. They're out of Las Cruces, and they've been testing areas downtown for contamination for several years, many times through the State Environment Department. When you start looking at putting in a storm drain, are you going to be careful that some of these areas that may have contamination from old areas where there was service stations, that we could potentially spread that contamination downtown, depending upon how the storm drains are lined up. And so I think that needs to all be kind of really put into a composite, not just singularly like they're listed. It's just my personal opinion. And the other question I had was about the veterans law. I understood that was put on hold.
No, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, we do have funding through the legislative appropriations for the replacement of the Veterans Wall.
Right.
With the granite wall, and that's how it is underway already. The funding was put on hold, but it has been released since. Both Tracy and Melissa have been working with DFA to get that money moving, so we have been given the authorization to proceed forward.
Thank you for that. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So those are just my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Before I move on, I'd just like to respond, just to put in something. Tracy and I went to an NMDOT workshop conference on Friday over in Elephant Butte, and we were talking about almost everything you were saying, and we asked if NMDOT would consider having a joint workshop with staff, the commission, and their engineers and people such as that to come up with some type of a plan on how to, exactly to your concerns, Commissioner Clark. And they would be really willing to do it. We just have to decide when we want to do it. But we've got to do some research on our part, I think, to come up with, this is what we like to do, this is what we can do on our own, how can you help us, and what can we do on your streets? Because we're not going to take Broadway and Main Street back, and that's obvious. We can't afford it. So I appreciate you saying that, because it was just, Tracy brought it up at the meeting on Friday over in Elephant View. So thank you, appreciate that. Any other concerns on the list? I do have one question, Tracy. Was staff consulted on this? I mean, did we go out and ask staff's input? Because the men and the women are in the field every single day, fighting the muck and the mire and all the things that they have to deal with. Did we go to them and say, you know, in a perfect world, what needs fixing on your watch? Or is this just from other commissioners and the public?
Mayor, I did actually meet with staff on the items that are listed. And remember, these are a carryover from last year. And that's part of what this meeting is about, is to find out what else we need to add on. But we have spoke to staff. I met with Bo in depth a couple of times, and we went over what projects were on there for him, because he did have a lot of electric. I've also met with water and wastewater, plus I'm familiar with the water and wastewater. And I know that in our both our department head meetings as well as our project group meetings, that's been addressed as well by the city manager. And so we've discussed the funding, the needs for projects, and there again, it's out there to the public and to the commissioners for anything additional that they want to put in. This is just a draft that's up there. It's not been organized or ranked. The project ranks brought over from last year's list.
And if I may, sorry, Commissioners, and again, this is just a wish list that we have to put together every year to the state. And a lot of these projects are, you know, especially those that are ranked at the very top, pretty much are the ones that the commissioners are giving us the push to say, go after this funding. That's why we have animal shelter, wastewater treatment plant, Cook Street Airport. Those are the projects that we go after. There's a lot of projects, and we understand the need for a lot of the things, for example, like storm drainage. But there's so much funding out there. I know Mark Valenzuela is very familiar with some of these funding sources, and unfortunately, grant funding is not always out there available for some of these projects. So although it's a wish list, it kind of gives us that guide. And every year, even when we work on our budget, you know, as Tracy mentioned, we sit down with the department heads and go over what can we do to start addressing some of the things, not only in the ICIP, but things that are brought up by the commission and the public.
Thank you. If there's no questions right now from the commission, I'd like to open it up to the public. We only had one person sign up, but maybe you didn't understand, so I'm just going to open it up to anyone who wants to speak specifically on the ICIP. Please, I'll just call on Ms. Barone first, because she was the only person that signed up. But we'll open it up if anybody wants to talk.
Contrary to what Mr. Fuentes says, the infrastructure capital improvement plan for a city is a roadmap to what they want to spend this year, today, next year, and in the future. And since I've been coming to these ICIP meetings in Tier C, for the first 5 years, the top number one thing we needed was a waterfall coming down Tank Hill and flowing into Geronimo Springs somehow. That was the number one on the wish list. And then it went downhill from there. And this is not something that you folks decide and tell us or pull out last year's list or the year before. This is where neighborhoods get together with their representatives and give them a wish list of what they want in their neighborhood. Then the people who represent that neighborhood come to their commission and they discuss and prioritize according to, so everybody gets a piece of the action, what they want. Then they discuss how they're going to finance it and where the money's going to come from. These are not just fairy tale things. I see an animal shelter, I see a regional safety complex, I see water line replacements, I see a lot of things that aren't there. This is time for our citizens, the police department, the hospital, the boards and commissions, which we don't have any citizens' boards and commissions in this town, except for public arts and PUAB, public utilities. We have no other boards and commissions, so we have no other public input. That's how it's done here. That's why you're all sitting there wondering, oh, well, this is just a few, look at the money there, millions of dollars in the column. It's not something we can just write a check for. Anyway, I would recommend a real public meeting for the town to talk about what their ideas are and their wish lists are. Because all you're doing is going further and further and further away, and everybody notices it. It's like National Night Out. You're supposed to go into your neighborhoods and meet with the police and your neighbors. Instead, they went to the Sierra County Fair Barn at night, where people who don't have any transportation can't get to, and that's how things are done here. Please don't come. Thank you.
Commissioners, Ron Fan, Truth or Consequences. I want to speak about the regional safety complex. I see that it was originally listed as the #1 item on 2020's wish list or roadmap, as Mr. Perone points out. This very much confuses me, as this city has operated with police departments since time immemorial in spaces no bigger than 4,900 square feet, which is what they have right now. Our population, since its apogee in 2000, when it was over 7,000 people, has diminished and is continuing to diminish. And now we are looking at funding a 12,800 square feet or some number like that police department for a dozen police officers. This just doesn't make any sense. You have a figure of $2,600,000. That does not include what you are going to have to pay in interest. It's going to be over $4.5 million. $4.5 million amounts to how much asphalt for filling potholes, how much water lines. That's almost half of one of your appropriation proposals up there. And as far as what is important, this is not. The police department is not going to operate better. The city is not going to be safer with a bigger building. And unfortunately, on today's agenda, you're talking about funding it already, through some maybe private sources, like you did with the trash plant, which got pushed through with a loan, a bond issue that was never approved by the people. There was no public hearings on it. And yet we have a trash plant in the middle of our well field. Where is the sense? Where is the sense? Where is the logic behind all of this? If we need drainage in the downtown area, how much will $4.5 million provide? If we need water lines, if we need, you name it. But these things are being pushed aside for a public safety complex which can prove no value whatsoever. You cannot prioritize that in this year ahead of other projects. And I see that you push the seniors back further. It doesn't make any difference. Give us back our Lee Bell Johnson Center and we'll be very happy. It is earning zero for the city. It is doing nothing for the downtown area. If anybody in this room has been by there at any time of the day or night, and you see that there is no one parking in that area because no one is visiting it. The facilities that are in there belong in commercial buildings if they can afford to operate that way. So the senior project, you can put it right back up on the top of the list, and for very little bit of money, take out the displays, send Geronimo Trails into a commercial building where they were before, and give the seniors back their senior center. But it's not just a senior center, it's a community center. It was only a senior center during daytime hours. If you ever bothered to look at the laws and the rules and regulations about it. From 8 to 4, it was for seniors. The rest of the time, it was for the community, for dances, for plays, for concerts, for meetings, for you name it. And that is our facility, and we need it back. And it should be returned to the people and taken off of this list. Won't cost very much. It certainly won't cost $4.5 million for a handful of police officers. Excuse me. That's throwing money down a rat hole.
Hello, my name is Erica Baker. I'm a sergeant with the TRC Police Department. Mine isn't going to take 5 minutes. I just want to say thank you to the commission on this regional safety complex. Everybody's going to have their own opinion on why that building shouldn't go forward. But I can speak on behalf of my patrolmen and the rest of my department, as it isn't important. It's important to us. We don't feel that it's a waste of money. We put our lives on the line every day for this entire community, and we're very grateful that we even have the opportunity to talk about having a new building for ourselves. I've been with the police department for 6 years. We're pretty cramped in there, and we do have plans on moving and possibly hiring more people to help us out. So I just want to say thank you, and we are very excited to have the opportunity to have the regional complex safety built for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, this is a business meeting. Anyone else like to speak about the ICIP? Martin?
Martin Nigel, Iona Street. Number one, I would like to say thank you, because this is like a really difficult job. The water sewer issue doesn't seem like a big problem. I turn on the tap, clean water comes out, I flush the toilet, it goes away. But it's not a romantic problem, but I think it is important and urgent. Every city has this problem. It's always been delayed. Let's do this, let's do that, rather than the basics. So I think that should be a very number one priority, and if you have to get together with other DMO. So that one book about 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, they talk about the 4 squares, and one of them is important but not urgent. Once the pipes fall apart, it's important and urgent. Right now, it's like a little thing ready to crumble. I always think about, for the police station, I always think about recycling. Like, we have that old school that's, I guess, not totally used at 8th and 2nd. I wonder if that would be a possibility. But I don't know enough about the details. So. But anyway, thanks for doing your job.
Thank you. Anyone else like to address the commission? Sheriff Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the commission. I'll be brief. I don't know, as Mr. Fuentes indicated, whether you have selected any particular order on these projects. I would like to see the delivery systems for our utilities placed as a priority. These are definitely infrastructure projects that we need to be looking at. About a year ago, there was a water line break just up the road from my residence on Copra Street. I was notified by the utility water folks there that they needed to switch over or switch over to another valve system, put me on off of the residential line that had busted, and I guess it was a larger line that they put it on. But they were going around with a pressure gauge and putting it on each of the houses there. And they were concerned at the fact that because they had to switch over to this larger line to provide service for us, that some of the older residences, which mine is one of them, that they might have a problem because this was a higher pressure. 120 PSI is what was actually reading off of the, now my concern was I've got old copper lines in my house there. And so if we continue to have these kind of interruptions in service where we're having to switch over to larger lines, and I mean, this is a cost that I would have incurred had there been a breakage inside of one of my walls. So I would like to see that the water line replacements, any type of the utility delivery type systems, put at the top of our infrastructure and capital improvement list there. These are truly infrastructure items. A lot of these other items that you have up here, we would, in the county, I know I attended their ICIP meetings, and we have the difference between the infrastructure and projects. We have pet projects that we would like to see done, but truly, I think we can narrow this down to just infrastructure items, and I really think that the delivery of our utility systems is truly one that needs to be at the top of the list. So, thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Claus? Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry.
Mark Chester. House Return 618, Charles. Commissioners, I did not, in the original part, I did not see the drainage very prominently as an item, but then I heard later on that it is on the radar screen, and I appreciate that. But that is, I think, important for all of us to understand that drainage is an integral part of the infrastructure and only causes problems intermittently. But when it does, it creates problems for everybody. Look at San Antonio. Look at, no, it's not just a local problem. It's a problem nationwide. But it's forgotten. Let me further address one that was on the items in the ICIP, and that is critical from my perspective. It is, again, was called AMR. That's a wrong name. It's a misunderstanding at worst, but it's certainly a wrong name. I thought we had basically agreed to that AMI is the system that the city would strive to get. And it's a significant technical difference that must be understood. And if the staff does not understand that one, it is critical that they be educated about it. Because it is absolutely, hundreds of years apart. No, hundreds of years, that's overstated. But it is absolutely critical that we do that. And the last item that I would think we would want to address is attempting, and it's not necessarily ICIP, maybe even a forerunner to ICIP, is we need to understand the relationships between physical systems and accounting systems. And I think we need to get that one under control. It's not under control in the current budget. It's not under control in the audits. I think it is critical for the city to spend some time to get that one under control. There is currently in the budget no allocation of costs to the utilities for services that the utility receives from the general fund. That's critical. Now, The utility, one of the utility provides significant loans and costs to the general fund, but the general fund is spending money on behalf of those departments. And it's not accounted for in the budget. It's not there. And I think the staff needs to be empowered and directed to cure that problem. And I think we need to sometimes step back in order to get to the real problems that we have. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. I just want to speak briefly on behalf of the law enforcement complex. I heard Mr. Fenn's comments about, is the community going to be any safer? I want you to tell you what's going on here is on a more global level than a building. The Truth and Consequences Police Department has an incredible staff group of dedicated people in that police department, some of them behind me here today. I want you to know, I can tell you, yes, it will be a safer, better community because we're going to offer services that we don't have the room to offer that are much needed in this community. Youth services, parent education is a component of youth services, cadets, an explorer program. All those things are going to be able to occur there. We can't do it now. We don't have the room. I can't even increase our field forces with reserve officers because we don't have the room. That will be occurring at a new facility. So I just wanted to take a brief moment to say I'm very proud of the hard men and women we have in our department who look for 50 ways to get around obstacles and get the job done. We currently house animal control, animal shelter, and code enforcement in the police department, and we're busting at the seams. So to say that it wouldn't be safer, and I just want to comment on this, when this is up and full and running, there will be in excess of probably 40 people working out of that facility easily. So, and there will be services that, like crime prevention, that we can't do now, and have somebody go out and help a victim that's had their house burglarized, or a business owner that's coming new into town and says, what can I do to make my business a harder target? We want to provide those services, and they're much needed in this community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else want to address some ideas, thoughts? Okay, I will turn it back to the commission manager.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to address just, again, I want to clarify Mr. Fenn's statement in regards to the financing and the funds being used for this project. What we're talking about here, Mr. Fenn, is the PDGRT that was actually voted on by the commission through an ordinance that was dedicated specifically for the police department. And that's why you have the police officers here, the chief, who are all in support because they're using that funding that was dedicated for them for this project, and they're all in favor of doing that. So using that money for other things other than law enforcement, like water lines, streets, it's not eligible for those things. That's why we're having to look for other funding sources for those kind of things. So I just want to clarify that for the public and the commission. We're not talking, this funding that we're talking about for the law enforcement is for law enforcement. We can't use that for anything other than law enforcement. And that's why you have the folks here, the officers here and the chief in full support of this project, because it's their funding that we're talking about. So, and again, Mr. Hamilton, I certainly appreciate, sir, your comments, and I agree with you in the sense of infrastructure is our number one priority. And that's why for the last couple of years, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I think, as you all have, our staff has been working diligently to try to upgrade some of our infrastructure. That's why you see the wastewater treatment plant upgrades. And right now, one of the things we're looking for, sir, to your question and about what happened in that situation is the Cook Street Water Treatment Plant. We are in the process of applying for USDA funding. Where's Tracy? Okay, is that correct, Tracy? And to try to upgrade that system, and in hopes that maybe we can also add water lines to that system, because there is a need, and I agree with you, sir, the infrastructure is critical. So we are looking every year, that's where we're focusing some of our application and efforts, because there's more funding at the state level, at the federal level for infrastructure needs. And now, even at the federal level, we're talking about, pumping billions of dollars into infrastructure. So that's where we know we can access money. Unfortunately, some of the other items that are more quality of life, streets or sidewalks, some of those things, we struggle, like every other community, to find that pocket of money. So, thank you, sir, and I agree with that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Just had a couple of comments. I want to echo Manager Fuentes' thoughts on the utilities that was brought forth by Sheriff Hamilton. Martin, that building is a county building on Date Street, and the county would have to voluntarily give it up, find offices for the tax assessor and all the other offices that are located there. So right now, that building would not be available to the city. And just so there was not a misrepresentation, you heard someone speak, I think it was Ms. Perone, that mentioned that the city has 2 boards. And without really scratching my head too much, I came up with the recreation board, the golf board, the airport board, the hospital board, the lodger stacks, and the library board. So there is opportunities for citizens who have interests in certain fields or interest in serving their community to volunteer and serve on these boards. It's not a community with just 2 boards, and probably if you come up with some more, and my fellow commissioners could probably come up with more as well. Okay, so Commissioner, where would you like to go from here? I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Tracy.
It's a public hearing, so it will come back to the commission at the next meeting.
Right, okay. And we have the deadline of September 1, something like that? This has to be in Santa Fe? Okay. All right, thank you very much for your thoughts, and if you have additional ideas and comments between now and next couple days before the agenda is formulated for the next City Commission meeting, which this will be brought back, please feel free to shoot an email to any commissioner that you deem, and they will get it to the right people. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is under G, ordinances. A discussion action resolution number 05-1718 and resolution number 05/A-1718, approving the required community development block grant annual certifications and commitments and fair housing policy. Melissa Torres, our Director of Finance.
Good morning, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioners, City Manager. We are respectively requesting that we approve the annual certificates for the community CDBG, which is the Community Development Block Grant. This is something that is our state appropriations that has awarded us for $500,000. Upon awarding that, the CDBG is very strict in regards to what the requirements is for us to obtain that funding. Upon that requirement is to ensure that we yearly adopt the required fair housing forms. And so this package is basically what you guys saw last year around the same time. And so we are just renewing this package because this grant is still open for us to use.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I think this seems to be pretty much just a form that we do almost every year, every time we get awarded the CDBG grant. If there are no further comments or questions from the commission, I will stand for a motion, please.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 05-1718 and resolution number 05-A-1718, approving the required community development block grant, CDBG annual certifications and commitments, and fair housing policy as noted by Melissa Torres.
I have it. Thank you. I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead. I need a second.
Second, Mayor.
I have a second by Commissioner Heschler. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those, I beg your pardon, can we have a roll call, please?
Honorable Steve Green?
Yes.
Honorable Sandra Whitehead?
Yes.
Honorable Ralph Heschler?
Yes.
Honorable Kathy Clark?
Yes.
Honorable Joshua Frankel?
Yes.
It's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item is G2, discussion action request to appeal resolution number 1516/17 related to 1308 10th Street. Bobby Hanna, who's in the audience, is the owner of that piece of property. And presenting initially for the city will be Robbie Travis, our building inspector. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. We passed a resolution, or you all passed a resolution, 1516-17 on demolition of 1308 10th Street, which is Miss Hannah's property. And we've been working with her, she's been trying to see if she can sell it for somebody to fix it up or do something that they want to do with it, maybe tear it down and build something new there. But has been unsuccessful so far. And so we came to you guys. She had originally appealed this when it first came out. However, she missed the deadline of the 10 days to appeal it, but we still want to give her the opportunity. And we've been trying to work with her. I have to say she's been very cooperative, and anytime I've tried to get with her and stuff, she's, I believe you're the granddaughter, right, of the property? Mm-hmm. So she's inherited the property essentially, and so it's been a little bit of a tough situation for her to handle. But we're here today to see if my recommendation would be to set a deadline that she can get the property either sold or cleaned up, and then we proceed with the resolution if they can't. You know, we're trying to figure out, we don't know how long we want to extend this. I did talk to her recently when I asked her to come to the meeting. She does have somebody looking at it right now that's trying to get a loan. So I'll let her kind of explain, or I'm open for questions first, and then she can explain her situation a little bit.
Well, it might be helpful if I might make a few comments from a legal position where we are. As I understand it, the City Commission did adopt this resolution back on December 23rd, December 13th, and then Ms. Hanna filed her objection on December 27, 2016. But as Mr. Travis points out, you are treating the objection as being timely filed. So really the next step would be, and in fact, it's even set forth at the end of the resolution. If you take a look at the very end, very last sentence, if a timely objection is filed, the City Commission will schedule a hearing to decide the merits of the objection. So I think really the next step really would be is to get a hearing scheduled to hear Ms. Hanna's objection to the resolution. And of course, during the interim period, the parties can still work with each other to see whether something can be worked out. But I think in order to keep the process going as to whether we actually have to ever demolish the building, we need to get a hearing set on the objection. So I really think it's probably the best thing, and I think it's actually premature to hear from Ms. Hanna today regarding what her plans are, you know, and she can do that at a hearing if we get something scheduled.
For me personally, I think that's certainly fair and reasonable, since we have it in our code that that option is available to anyone if they, and I'm looking at the letter, I object to this resolution, so certainly Ms. Hanna should have her day before this commission. That's just my opinion, but I'll turn it open to my fellow commissioners in relationship to any questions you have of Mr. Travis. Then I would like to stand for a motion. Maybe someone would make a motion to authorize staff to come up with a date that's convenient for all parties to give Ms. Hanna an opportunity to appeal this resolution before the City Commission.
Well, and maybe I'm just thinking out loud here, but since Ms. Hanna is here, maybe we can select a date now, and it will be scheduled for a battershell hearing at that time. And
one of the questions that I had, I think, is, does Ms. Hanna are you still wanting to appeal the resolution, or what are you wanting to do?
I would like the opportunity to be able to sell the property. I can't make people come up with money right away. If I could do that, I would have a ton of money. And
Mr. Mayor and Commissioner, Ms. Hanna, I'm sorry for interrupting, but Jay, I think the mayor's recommendation was appropriate, and that is to have staff get with Ms. Hanna about the date and time, and then, because I think since this will be coming before the commission as a quasi-judicial battershell process, then we'll allow you to present any statements at that time. So I think now it's just a matter of moving forward with allowing staff that ability to make, come up with a date and time for the hearing. Okay?
Commissioner Ashland.
By scheduling this hearing, is Ms. Hannah still able to sell the property between now and then?
Well, definitely there will be some time from now until the hearing, so she can definitely take whatever action she deems necessary.
I might
But
make a suggestion then that we postpone the hearing for at least 30 days and allow Ms. Hannah to try to...
again,
this person that's interested.
Mr. Mayor and Commissioner Heschler, again, since this is an appeal process, I think it is appropriate just to go ahead and schedule, and we can certainly schedule it, next month. But I think now would not be the appropriate time to start negotiating or discussing the case with Ms. Hannah. So, but we'll certainly keep that thought in mind, and we'll schedule something further on out.
So would someone like to make
I
a
have
motion?
a legal question.
Commissioner Clark.
Attorney Rubin, my question is this, that this resolution's already been passed, right?
Correct.
So are we obligated under this resolution to go forward based on what the resolution says, or do we need to put a motion forward that says we want to postpone this resolution even though it's already been passed to allow a hearing, battle shell hearing to occur?
Well, it's been, by the fact that parties have been talking for the last several months, it actually in effect has been postponed by everybody's consent. But I think now that it's before you today and we want to take action, I think the next step is that what's going on is this objection is still pending, so I think we just need to get something scheduled. And I agree with Mr. Fuentes, I think it's appropriate for the parties to discuss it in appropriate dates.
But do we need to say that we are going to postpone this already approved? No? Mr. Appeal?
No, because you're not really postponing anything. You actually adopt the resolution for the next step in the process as per the resolution itself and by state law and also by our code. The next step would be that since Ms. Hannah has filed her objection, the next step is to hear her objection to the resolution. So the resolution really, it's still there. You've made this resolution. You're not going to take any action to enforce the resolution until we have the objection heard.
Even though her objection was filed after the deadline date?
Well, as I understand from talking to Mr. Travis and the parties have been talking, the city has agreed to accept the appeal filed by Ms. Hannah as timely filed, as I understand from the discussions that the parties have had.
Yeah, I mean, just knowing the commission and, we try to work with people and we're trying to give her a chance, and that's why we did it. And so, yes, I would,
Attorney Appel.
Could you, Mr. Travis, give us those dates again? That is, the date of the original resolution and the date when her appeal came in?
Sure. The date of the original resolution was December 13th, 2016, and her letter was December 27th, 2016.
Attorney Appel, that's actually one day under the limit.
Yes.
There's 15 days
Thank you.
allowed, and that's 14 days, so.
You only count 10 days, you only count working days.
Right.
That went over Christmas, so you are absolutely correct here.
So even,
It's timely.
we're not even necessarily, the upshot of all that actually is timely filed, whether we're working with Ms. Hannah or not, so that's a good point. Okay, I agree.
And then if I might follow up on something Mr. Rubin said, you are under the state statute here. Procedures are governed by section 318.5 of the New Mexico statutes. She is entitled to a hearing, and the hearing determines whether the resolution would be withdrawn at that time. The resolution remains in effect until the hearing.
Thank you, Lurs. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, I will stand for a motion to someone authorize staff to work with Ms. Hannah to come up with a date to bring this back to the commission for her opportunity to appeal the resolution.
I'll make that
So
motion.
moved as noted by.
We have a tie.
Agreed.
So I guess I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead and a second by Commissioner Clark. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, can we please have a roll call?
Honorable Steve Green?
Yes.
Honorable Sandra Whitehead? Aye. Honorable Ralph Hischler?
Yes.
Honorable Kathy Clark?
Aye.
Honorable Joshua Franco?
Yes.
Carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Hannah. Okay, the next item is unfinished business, discussion action, special use permit for Women's Recovery Program at 819 North Date Street. Mr. Travis will be our presenter, and then I we'll ask Ms. Mecca to come forward.
Mr. Mayor, before we get started here,
Yes.
I've given this a lot of thought and processing, and I think that at this time, I am going to recuse myself, as my family owns the businesses that encompass the area of this, and in all fairness, I would like to recuse myself.
Thank you very much for that, taking that, the high road, as they say. We appreciate that. Thank you. So where will you be so we can bring you back?
On my cell phone.
Okay. All right.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I need to find out a potential conflict of interest that I may have with this as well. I don't know if I need to recuse myself or just abstain from voting.
Well, we have lawyers here, so why don't you tell us what your conflict, what your perceived conflict is, and we'll let them determine it.
As a real estate agent right now, I have a listing for a property that's adjacent to this proposed site, and I see that there might be a bit of a conflict of interest in the future with the current sellers.
Okay. Attorneys?
What, I mean, maybe this is obvious, but what specifically is your concern?
Commissioner Frankel, did you hear Attorney Rubin? His question was specifically, what is your concern?
Representing the client in the sale of this adjacent property, their concerns with the potential use of their neighbor.
Can you read that, Mr. Commissioner Heschler, at the last meeting, you read that letter from,
Yeah, they actually contacted me also.
Right.
Let me ask Commissioner Frankel, I mean, would you anticipate that the decision that the city commission would make with regard to this issue could affect you directly, your financial interests?
I do.
Okay.
Okay.
Then in that case,
then you should recuse.
Yes, I agree.
That's the standard.
Right.
Right, okay. And thank you for forthcoming with that. So we're down to 3. All right, Mr. Travis.
Okay, before you again is the item, a special use permit for the Women's Recovery Program at 819 North Date Street. Ms. Mecca is here, and so we're bringing it before you again to make a decision on this that you postponed last meeting. So we'll stand for any questions.
Okay, any questions? I'd like to
make a comment.
Sure, of course.
I did take it upon myself, Mayor Green, to contact the business owner that surrounds that particular complex. I had a very interesting discussion with him, and he does have some concerns, but in general, he was supportive of the idea. The concerns come from the previous owner, the previous situations, and we should not, in my opinion, cause issue with what happened in the past. We have a new potential owner, totally different management style, and we should take that into consideration. He is concerned that, potentially there's not enough oversight over this situation, that he could be negatively affected, but he doesn't see that happening at this time. I kind of share his opinion in that, here's an opportunity for a business person to get started here. We should not punish this person for the transgressions of the past, and we have an opportunity here that, we can take it for a year, see how it goes. We can always not reissue a license down the road if we feel that there's too many issues or too many problems. Thank you.
Thank you for reaching out to that particular individual. Mr. Travis, I do have a couple of questions before we address them. Ms. Mecca. So on our background setup, the property has been a motel for many years and a transitional living complex. Tried to go in with many problems that Commissioner Heschel was referring to, and let's not tar someone in the future for someone else's bad behavior in the past, arising and had to shut down the business. So, Mike, I have a question. Who was the entity that shut down the business? Was it the commission? Was it the police department? Who did that?
It was actually my department, building inspector. They were operating. They came in and didn't do things prior, so they started putting up a fence, which was illegal. They were, the police chief had contacted me. They had, 20 or so calls there. So we went out, we called them, met with them, said, hey, this thing isn't, you didn't set it up, you didn't come and, get permission, go through the process. And so that we went ahead and told them, their attorney called me and we met there and said, hey, yeah, we understand that it has to go through a process for us to do this legally. And so we shut it down.
Okay, thank you. I have one other question. Staff recommendation, if approved, they would have to meet several conditions. And you might have addressed this 2 weeks ago, and I can't bring it out of whatever's left up here. So could you, what do you mean by that line?
Essentially, we thought about a probationary period, something that Mr. Heschler, or Commissioner Heschler brought up, but really our position is zoning on it. What are the zoning and building code requirements? And so it does meet the zoning within a C1, so there's not a problem there. But we would want building permits, make sure that it, if they're going to remodel and do some stuff in their plans, everything's done with permits and done properly, so we can approve that, look at it. The fencing situation is a big concern to the police chief. We want to make sure that the fence isn't done to where people can hide behind it or do activity behind it that we can't, the public can't see or the police can't see. But in the other hand, we want to make sure that it's private enough for them that they have their privacy. So those are some of the issues. Signage would be one. Security would be another. We want to make sure that they have proper security cameras up, and I know they've mentioned that they're going to use some of that. So those are our recommendations, stuff along those lines.
Okay. Are there any other questions of Mr. Travis?
Yeah,
Commissioner Clark?
Yeah, can I go past Mr. Travis and talk to the chief?
Well, let me see if do you have any other questions of Mr. Travis? Okay. Commissioner Clark? And then I'd like to ask Ms. Mecca to come down. We'll have some questions of her too.
I just want to make everybody clear that I support the concept of this. I think it's amazing. I have some real concerns about the way that building's laid out and the logistics of it, and how, my experience and what I've seen in my years, and that's why I'm asking you, is halfway houses or whatever, normally you can close them in. They're not in and out kind of structures for people who are under rehabilitation situations. And my real concern is for, one, this is a very visible location. Two, it is a situation where everybody has their own entry and exits, and the person who's living on site, who's supposed to be in charge of these people, is going to be asleep at night, whether there's a camera on the door or not. These people could, in fact, leave, and unless there's an alarm on the door. And my concern is for the police department. You've got several rooms up there, and you're going to have, 18, 24 people there potentially. And how safe do you feel this complex is, given your knowledge of what they're trying to accomplish?
I want to go on record by first stating I also support the concept. I think it is a program that's needed if it's structured and has the proper model for that type of endeavor. I also am concerned about the location. We had a big problem, and I agree, we don't want to penalize this new applicant on the behalf of the prior applicant and some of the things that occurred, but some of the things there are not going to change. The location, for instance, is not going to change, and I've been contacted by business owners in the area, and I've actually went and spoke with some as well. Some have been supportive, some have not been. Some have been kind of in the middle of the road. Our biggest problem that we have is that each one of those is its own little unit. Where we ran into a big problem was getting some of these folks out, and that last person that was in there, so actually has a bona fide live-in counseling Serenity House in 2 different cities. They are a absolutely recognized program, and you saw what happened here with that. We had to serve eviction notices on these people to get them out. And there was some argument and some concern over if that could be circumvented, and it could not be. And we had to go through the process, and part of the problem we had is they were in one room one day, another room the next day, and, you know, the court doesn't accept, well, I know the room said 12, but I went and posted it on 9. You know, and it played very difficult for the police department. In a very short period of time, we had many calls for service there. We had 11 open investigations at one time. It was very taxing on manpower. So the location does play a big part on that. There's an alley that goes behind there, and part of the problem is they were selling drugs out the back windows of these apartments. Now, I did speak with Ms. Mecca, and she did agree to put video surveillance system there. But like you said, you know, you can't, and if you don't have someone there physically 24 hours a day awake, watching what's going on, and have the ability to remove people from the premises immediately upon violating the conditions, you know, it does leave us with some problems.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Mecca, come forward, please. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
So I know location keeps coming up, and it seems like everyone's worried about the location. From a program perspective, this is a very good location. It's close to the hospital where these women can receive the services they need, mental and physical. It's close to the job market that's up in the northern, that's where it's hiring, is up in the northern part of the town. It's close to the ISD office, it's close to CYFD so they can work reunification with their children. It's close to the schools so they can be still involved with the children's education. So from a program perspective, this is a very good location for this type of program. You know, and I'm truly sorry that whoever was there before has like messed this up or whatever they did, but that really should have no bearing on what I'm trying to do. You know, I've done my research. You know, this program, it's working in different communities. Hobbs, it's working in a Hobbs community. It's working in Carlsbad community. I went over this week and visited Alamogordo. They have the same type of programs going there, and it's working in those communities. So, you know, I'm sorry that, you know, the last program messed it up or made you guys feel unsafe. As far as I know, there was no arrest for prostitution, no arrest for solicitation of prostitution there. There was some drug arrest. You know, I've talked to other business owners as well around there. They weren't even aware that all this was going on with the last program. Hold on just a minute, please. So I find it interesting that the person that wrote the letter in, when I was actually looking at that property to possibly purchase it, they knew what it was going to be used for, and there was no complaints at that time. So, you know, I'm just kind of at awe of where to even go from here, you know?
Chief.
Just want to say, in the spirit of cooperation, Phyllis was with me when we called one of the locations, particularly in Hobbs. And the big difference is these homes, these other programs are located in residential neighborhoods. It's your house next door that you would never know is a rehabilitation home or halfway house, so to speak, for folks trying to get back on their feet. Because inherently operating out of a location like that, there's increased security, minimizes foot traffic's going to be recognized immediately, and a lot of the problems that we've had that we could potentially experience are eliminated just by the location itself. And the guy, even the manager there, even expressed some concern over going from a dormitory style arrangement to a motel.
The difference is with a motel's type of environment like I have, we don't have the issues with eviction notices because that's covered under one of the statutes that was mentioned in the last meeting. I don't have it with me, but so, you know, and if evictions become a problem, you know, I've talked to the sheriff's department, and they're more than willing to help me if evictions become overwhelming or too much, or if you guys are understaffed, you know what I mean? So, again, they're trying to work with the police department, and we're trying to make it so it's a community effort for everybody to work together to make something happen to better our community and get some of these people off the streets and into a better environment.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions. I guess I'll start. Just a statement. As a city commissioner, I rule I just wrote down some notes when you were talking, to support existing businesses and to encourage the need for services that enhances the quality of life for our citizens here in town, and to encourage new businesses. So with that said, is it fair to say that this program is modeled after other existing programs?
Correct.
Okay. It would be interesting if we'd gotten some letters from the administrators of those other programs to see what the pitfalls are. I mean, there's no such thing as a perfect world. I think we both maybe can agree on that, but you can try to make it as perfect as possible. I would have loved in your application to see people who are living that dream and performing in much needed service in Hobbs, and you mentioned some other communities, to see what the pitfalls are, so maybe you could cut that off at the pass. Maybe something you hadn't thought about, but that they've experienced that. That's one thought. The other thing is, in your literature, it mentions Sierra County PACE, P-A-C-E, is a 16-bed women's recovery unit, and yet in the diagram, it's 20 beds. So
That's correct. At 16, that was actually another building that I was looking at, and that fell through, so that was not updated. This has more room, so it can hold more women.
Okay. And you also had mentioned that you were considering buying the facility.
Correct.
Is there...
Leasing to own.
Okay. So I was wondering if there is an option of... I would hate like heck to you invest your life savings and some of your friends' life savings, or whatever it's going to take, to get this up and running, and then it all goes to hell in a handbasket.
It won't, but I
and
appreciate
you get
that.
hurt financially. So what I'm wondering is, do you think there's an accommodation that the present owner, because I heard the word probation, someone mentioned it here. Is there a possibility to work with the owner on a certain period of time to give yourself an opportunity to be successful with these women, and then it would be your determination to turn around and physically buy the building? I mean, do you think there's that opportunity?
With a lease option, I mean, you're just leasing it.
Right, okay.
It falls apart, you know what I mean?
Right, it's just whatever you put into it, you're not going to walk away with it. That's the thing. And I noticed that there, am I correct, and please correct me if I'm wrong, there are windows on the alley. And did I hear you say, or someone say, that you would secure those windows so that people could not sneak out at nighttime with a stepladder or something and go into the alley and just disappear, come back 5 hours later, and no one's the wiser? Did I hear that, or am I imagining that?
No, you're correct. I plan on securing the back windows. There's
Is
other,
that a fire issue?
well, there's other motels, though, that have only a front door and a window in the front. There's no back access, so, you know, if they're out of code, then we need to, you know, address that as well.
Code and see, but a motel is different than somebody who's living in a permanent. And we just need to make sure that they do have some kind of emergency egress to get out. And so we'll check those, that's part of the checklist that we'll be doing, you know, to make sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
And I
one
believe
way
as
to...
long as even a chair is available to break out a window, it's considered in code.
Okay. Yeah, I just was wondering how we get around that, to secure so there is no after-hours sauntering around, but also, God forbid, there's a fire. Now, I notice that there's no smoking in the room, there's no flames in the room, there's no cooking in the room.
Nope.
So unless someone were to violate that, those and the quite extensive rules,
It's gonna be a difficult, I mean, it's a very structured program,
Right.
I'll put it that way.
yeah, no, I was quite impressed with that. And these would not be only Tier C clients that you would be dealing with. I noticed that it talks about the state correctional facility. So is it possible we'll have other people coming in from other correctional
If we
facilities?
do, it would just be from the 7th Judicial, which is Sierra County and Socorro County.
Okay,
I really don't want to start bringing people in from Albuquerque. They come with their own problems, gangs, stuff like that. That's, the community doesn't need that.
okay. Questions, concerns, ideas? Commissioner has something to say.
So, Ms. Mecca, say it's 2 o'clock in the morning, something happens you don't know about. How do you figure out later on that there's been a transgression, or somebody snuck in or snuck out, or if there's an issue?
Well, the video cameras are going to help. And also, I have a lot of support from the community, and I've even had people in the community that's been sober for a long period of time that has offered to be in there until we can get like mentors for these women, that they would actually stay there to mentor these people. So, I mean, I'm going to be living on site. The way other programs have it, the longer you're in there, you do well, then they become a mentor for the rooms. They're almost like your eyes. And one thing I have noticed about working with drug addicts for so long is they love to tattle on each other. If somebody does something wrong, you're going to know it the next day because they're going to tell on the other person. That, I don't know why, but that's the way it is. So, you know, video cameras will help, but you know, I'm also going to rely on the women in the program to be the eyes and let me know what's going on as well, and community members that are offering to volunteer.
Thank you.
But it's like with any business, how are you going to know what happens in any business after hours? People aren't there all the time. It's the same concept.
Ms. Becker, the other programs that you mentioned, if you were fully occupied, you'd have 20 clients and yourself and a resident manager living on the premises.
Correct.
So is that 1-to-10 ratio, is that what other communities have?
Yes, it's 1 to 10, 1 to 8 if it's a detox. I mean, it just depends. I'm not a detox facility.
And you had mentioned, and to Mr. Travis's point, future plans of fence. So initially, and not asking you to decide what the future means, give us a date, but so at the present time, it would be an open facility.
Correct.
Right now, just the way you drive by it this morning, that's the way it's going to start out.
Correct.
Okay.
And personally, I don't want a fence up, because if you're trying to get these women back into our community, why do you want to keep them behind a fence? That's not what we're about. We want them to be transparent, to be out there in the community, to learn how to live in the community, to be a part of society in a productive way. So keeping them behind a fence isn't going to help that. That's my perspective.
Okay.
I prefer not to have a fence. And and, you know, law enforcement's concerned about it, and I prefer not to have one, so.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Clark, do you have any other?
I have one more comment.
Go ahead.
One more question.
Sure.
And I'm going to throw this out at Captain Morgan, because I know that you and I have had this conversation before. My understanding, as soon as somebody goes into an apartment, whether it's a motel, hotel, or whatever it is, if they're there 30 days or longer, it now becomes a rental.
And I think it's a question here, is this gonna be, a recovery facility, or is it gonna be a hotel? To a certain extent, hotels, there's a special section in the statute that covers that, and they can be removed. However, there's also, if they're rented like apartments, 30-day sections at a time, then they have to go through an eviction process. The statutes cover those. With this being a recovery type situation, that's where the question comes up. It's not necessarily a hotel, it's a facility, so then that requires the eviction process. There's not a problem with us doing the eviction process as long as those individuals follow the requirements of the courts. And I think that's where the questions and the problems are going to be, is in the eviction processes. Because the way I understand it, it will not fall under the hotel motel section.
No, I don't think so either, as soon as they're there 30 days. Thank you.
Mr. Powell? Yes, sir.
If I may, Mayor, Commissioners, we were asked actually to look into this. We also looked at the tenant agreement that is proposed by Ms. Mecca. And Jay and I both looked at it, and it is our view that that agreement creates a landlord-tenant type situation falling under the Uniform Owner-Resident Relations Act. And therefore, I agree with Captain Morgan and other statements have been made. I think that if they need to remove someone from one of these units, which are being rented by the tenants, it would have to be done through the usual court process, and our recommendation would be, as far as the city's police force is concerned, we would not recommend that they intervene to remove someone from one of these units unless they have the appropriate court order.
Attorney Appel, let me ask you a question, sir. What happens if the contract between the organization PACE and the individual is $165 a week for services, and those services include a place to live, and the person was willing to sign a contract that if it was deemed in the best interest of the program, that they leave the program, that they had no rights because they were not renting, they were paying for services, counseling, if you will. Was that a way to get around the law?
Mayor, Commissioners, I looked very carefully at that agreement, which actually has terms somewhat similar to those. I don't think it resolves the problem, because if you're going to give up rights that are protected by statute, there has to be a very clear and knowing waiver of those rights. Now, they could possibly add language like that says, you know, I am expressly giving up my rights as a tenant, you know, under the appropriate sections of the New Mexico statutes, and that might resolve the problem. But I am concerned about putting the city and the police force into the situation of trying to interpret that agreement. And that's my recommendation was, yes, if there is, just like any other residence, if there's a problem, if there's a fight, something like that, yes, the police will need to go and address it. But I recommended that the police not enter into one of these residential units and remove the tenant unless they had an order to do that from usually the magistrate.
Thank you. Not the answer I was hoping to hear, but I appreciate the counsel and advice.
Can we build her own building?
I wish we could. In all fairness to Ms. Mecca and the people who she has surrounded herself with, who have put energy, effort, time, probably a few bucks down the table, I think she's entitled to a vote today. I don't want to keep on kicking this can down the road. Mr. Travis, you had mentioned, or someone, maybe if you're not the person, I apologize. I wrote down probation period. Did you have, can you expand? What are we talking about time-wise? In your mind, what do you mean by it? If you were the person who said that?
Yeah, I was, yeah. I was thinking personally like 6 months, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, whatever it might be. I think Commissioner Heschler, said a year or so, then, so.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, to your question, and just for legal, is under a special use permit like this, is that advisable on putting a probationary period on that, because it is a special use permit? I mean, I'm wondering how you would interpret that, and whether 3 months, 6 months, what is a reasonable time frame?
Mr. Manager, Mayor, Commissioners, that's actually a very gray area of the law. There is nothing in New Mexico law that prohibits a time-limited special use permit. I believe you could do that. I will tell you that I had occasion to research this a couple of years ago. In some jurisdictions, those little states like New York, Pennsylvania, I don't remember where, it has been held by the courts that you cannot have a time-limited zoning permit like that. But I have seen no New Mexico cases that prevent you from having a time-limited special use permit that would be reviewed after X period to determine whether it would be continued or made permanent.
And to follow up on Manager Fuentes' point, would Ms. Mecca, her signature would be on that special use permit? If that is correct, then she voluntarily would be agreeing to the probation period and could not then turn around and say, oh, I don't know what you're talking about, I never agreed to this. I mean, she would sign a document that the special use permit will be contingent on certain deliverables or whatever is in that document of her own free will, and therefore the city would be protected. We would not end up with a lawsuit on our hands from Ms. Mecca if she signed that document on a probationary period.
Mayor, Commissioners, I think you are correct that if she voluntarily agreed to that, it would help resolve potential future problems. However, a special use permit normally is not something signed by the property owner or the tenant. A special use permit is simply a zoning authorization made by this body. So you would be adding additional conditions onto the special use permit, which is within your power.
Which we could do.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mayor, Mr. Othello, if I could ask, how is a special permit revoked? And do we have to have a threshold or a certain situations that would allow us to revoke it, or can be revoked by either party, or how is that determined?
In general, a special use permit remains, like I say, generally they are owner specific in the sense that they don't attach to the property indefinitely. They tend to be tied to a specific use. So, but they generally remain in effect while that use continues under the same ownership. Now, if you want to time limit it, you can do that, and you can impose other restrictions. And what you would have to do then is define what would happen if those conditions are violated. In general, I would anticipate that they would be sent a notice of violation, just like any other zoning violation, code violation, and they would have to come in if they want and try to justify why the use should not be revoked.
Yeah, what I'm looking for is an amiable way to get out of this thing in case if we did decide to issue a permit, so that we're not stuck in this thing for a long period of time.
Can we go to a conditional use? Does that Because I know with conditional uses, that's essentially the way it is. We give them, every year when we redo their business license, we check and go, hey, has anything changed? Have you, done something that you didn't apply for? Those, but I don't know if that's something we could use or not.
No, I see no reason that couldn't be used. The definitions of what exactly is a conditional use and what exactly is a special use, frankly, tend to vary from city to city. And if that's the custom that has been established in Truth or Consequences, you might want to consider approving this as a conditional use for a period of 1 year. And, that would have the same effect as what the mayor has suggested in terms of a time-limited special use permit.
Any further questions? I'd like to make a motion. Okay, I beg your pardon, you have your hand up, I'm sorry.
Ms. Mecca, how would you feel if there were a conditional use permit issued? It would not offer you as much security as a regular permit. It would be kind of a precarious position. How would you feel about that?
You know what, I know I can make this work, and I know I will make it work, and I'm not worried about conditions. Just tell me what they are.
Try.
Sure, okay.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve a conditional use permit. Where am I at here? Oh, okay, here we go. I make a motion that we approve a conditional use special use permit for a women's recovery program at 819 North Day Street. And this permit to be crafted by the city manager and his staff for review by the commission. Can we go for another vote on that?
Could you put, sir, in that motion for a period of 1 year to be renewed or reviewed every year or as on a need basis?
Yes, and this conditional use permit to be reviewed after a period of 1 year.
Okay. So I have a motion by Commissioner Heschel. Do I have a second? I will second that motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner, just for clarification, would that include the conditions recommended by staff?
Yes. Yes.
We'll work out the document and then it will be presented.
And it needs to be presented to Mrs. Mecca and determine if she wants to move forward with that or not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, so any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
I'm sorry?
I'm opposed.
Okay, it's 2-1, motion carries. Thank you very much, and,
Thank you.
Would you like me to tell you why you made me do it last meeting?
yeah, sure. No, I think you've made yourself clear. Ms. Mecca, I would just, we wish you well.
Thank you.
We obviously want you to be successful. The community wants you to be successful. The expression is the sword of Damocles, unfortunately, is over your neck. So please do a job that you'll be proud of. The women will gain something, useful lives back, and whatever we can do. And what I'd like to say is, come back next year. I'd love to hear from Commissioner Clark and say, if I knew then what I know now, I would have voted yes. So balls in
Fair
your
enough.
court.
When
Thank
can
you.
I expect to get the,
I would, Ms. Mecca, I would say contact Robbie after the
Okay.
meeting and just
Okay.
coordinate with him.
okay.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, next item, let's see, does anyone need to take a quick 3-minute break? Okay. We're going to take a 3-minute break, and then we will reconvene. Thank you.
Yeah, this meeting, we won't have to go to like.
Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Well, I'll just wait till everyone sits down, and Josh is still very much for understanding that the older you get, your bladder sometimes gets smaller, and we needed that break, so thank you. We are now back in session. The next item is under new business, discussion action, award the professional engineering service for the City of Truth and Consequences current community development block grant project, will be presented by Ms. Melissa Torres, our Director of Finance.
Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioners, City Manager, as I mentioned previously, the city was awarded a CDBG grant of $500,000. Upon that, again, our requirements of professional service engineering that we solicited on July 18th upon DFA's approval. Upon that, the vendors were Sauter & Miller, Miller Engineering Consultants, Smith Engineering, Bahana, Houston's, Corbin, Forest Green, Bridgelers and Paxton, Livingston Associates, and Atkins Engineering Associates, with the due date of response on July 21st. We received most of our response on July 26th. However, the Smithco Engineering and Miller Engineering Consultants were unresponsive. And so that basically means that upon when we sent the memo to these engineering services, because CDBG is so very specific, we had to be very specific on our solicitation regarding having 5 questions that they had a response on their qualifications, their experience of CDBG, and also on-site inspections. If the engineering professional service was non-compliant of answering these specific requirements, then they were classified as non-responsive. And that's how Smith Engineering and Miller Engineering became non-responsive. So it came down to the 2, which was Wilson and Company and Forest Green Engineering. Upon that, we had a committee, which was Arnie Castaneda, Water Supervisor, Tiffany Goolsby from the South Central Governments, and myself to review those 2 quotes. And we, as a committee, are recommending Wilson and Company. This company has previous experience working on the CDB projects, provided the most thorough action plan as part of their proposal. They included a detailed breakdown of the man hours involved for the staff working on this project, subcontracting, spot testing, and the total project cost. In addition, they provided the lowest bid of the 2 that we were under consideration. We are also requesting, and excuse us, but we had, as I said, DFA is very specific on these requirements. So everything that we do before we put upon you guys is we have to get their approval. And we just received their approval to proceed on signing the standard engineering professional contract. So we're also requesting that upon approving Wilson and Company as our professional services for the CDBG, we're also requesting that the agreement between the owner and professional engineering be also signed. And I stand for any questions at this time.
Thank you. Any questions of Ms. Torres from the commission? I just have one, Ms. Torres.
Yes, sir.
Their fee, does that come out of the $500,000, or does the city have to pony that up itself?
Are you referring to SCOG, or are you referring to the professional?
Wilson's, the $42,058.
That is included in the $500,000 grand total.
Good.
Yes.
Thank you. That was the only question I had. No
Is
other-
COG having to be our fiscal agent?
They are, yes, ma'am.
That's when we were
Unfortunately,
part of the-
yes, ma'am. Unfortunately, when we were awarded that, we were deemed to have a fiscal agent.
What are they charging us this round?
This one is estimated at $10,000.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I think Commissioner Clark, if I'm not mistaken, they are on one of our fast ones, they wanted 3%. We got them down to 2%. So, okay, if there are no further questions, I will stand for a motion, please, for approving of the engineering services for Wilson and Company, and also in that motion, we need authorization to sign
Yes, sir.
the document that Ms. Torres alluded to as well. Anyone brave enough? Come on, there was a challenge. I threw down. Someone should have put up. Come on.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the award of professional engineer services for the City of Truth or Consequences current Community Development Block Grant Project, CDBG, to Wilson and Company, and I authorize for signatures, the approval of signatures.
Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead. I need a second. Second by Commissioner Heschler. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you. Next item is discussion action funding option for law enforcement complex from G.K. Bauman Company. Mark as well. Thank you,
Good
sir.
morning, Mayor, members of the Commission, and Chief. Good to be here in your community. As we mentioned last month, with your approval of the intent resolution to move forward on the project, my role was to go out and examine several financing options that you would have available to you to finance the project. And so we did that, and I have returned, and I think we have some really fantastic results for the community. I'll briefly run through each scenario, and then I have a summary slide that will provide most of the detail that you'd be looking for. So the first option we looked at was selling these bonds out into the public market, where investors across the country would purchase them. And so under that scenario, it would be a $2 million construction fund. We would be required to have credit enhancement, which is a bond insurance program and also a surety policy. And what that does is it eliminates your requirement to have to borrow an additional 10% as a reserve account to hold for the benefit of bondholders. So we priced that in. In this scenario, your annual payment would be roughly $132,000. The total debt, this is interest and principal that you would pay back, would be $3.2 million. I heard a figure earlier talking about 4.6. It's not 4.6. With interest and principal under this scenario, it would be $3.2 million over 25 years. The next option we looked at was the New Mexico Finance Authority, who has already approved this financing if you choose to go forward with them. This would be a 25-year structure, similar to the previous one, $2 million construction fund. In this case, NMFA provides 0 or 0.1%, and that's an administrative fee. But in essence, 0% for the first $500,000 that you borrow, which is a huge benefit. Now, the negative here compared to the public market is the Finance Authority is going to require you to fund a reserve. So they're going to require you to borrow an additional $109,000 and set aside in an account for the life of the debt for 25 years until the bonds are paid off. That reserve would in essence be your last payment. It would be payment number 25, but it has to stay in the account for the entire time. Just in the event that something happened with the gross receipts tax and there wasn't sufficient money to make that annual payment, the Finance Authority would go first to that reserve.
Mark, who gets the interest on that every year?
It accrues to you. It accrues to the community.
Thank you.
In this case, the annual payment, as I mentioned, for the public offering, it would be $132,000. In this case, it's dropped down to $109,000. So it's very advantageous. Again, the prior scenario, the total principal and interest was $3.25 million. In this scenario, it's $2.73 million. So substantial reduction in the interest cost here. The third option is, which is actually several, and I hope I'm not confusing you, but I'll go through this one slowly. We also reached out to local banks or banks that operate in New Mexico. We have a group of 10 banks that we send all of these to on a routine basis. And so what the banks responded back to you with is they would structure the financing, or they would amortize the debt over 25 years, but they would only lend for 10, a maximum of 10. So what that means is at the end of 10 years, you would have to go and refinance the transaction. You'd have to, whatever principal is remaining, You would just have to restructure. It could be with that same bank that you may work with. So there's a couple different options here. So the first one that responded was BBVA Compass. They responded that they would structure it over 25 years, but wanted to be paid back, not in full, but they would want to be refinanced after 10 years. Their interest rate was 2.75%. At the end of 10 years, you would still owe $1.485 million. They also offered a second alternative, and that alternative was a 5-year structure. So you'd have to refinance in 5 years. Now, that was responsive to one of the commissioners last month who had asked for a shorter time frame. And so these structures give you that flexibility, but they do create the risk that you would have to go out into the market either in 5 or 10 years and refinance whatever principal is remaining. Bank of Albuquerque also responded. They were not willing to do the 25-year amortization, but they were willing to do a 10-year deal, just level debt. So you would have everything paid off over 10 years with Bank of Albuquerque. That interest rate was 2.58%. And I'll get into the bigger details here shortly. These bids do not require a reserve fund, so you don't have to borrow that additional 10%. And the average payments here on an annual basis, BBVA, their first option, the 10-year option, was $115,000. Their second option, the 5-year payoff, was $110,000. So the BBVA second option is very close to the NMFA's, with the exception that you have that refinance risk. And then Bank of Albuquerque, again, this is paying everything off in 10 years. That annual payment is $236,000. So let me take you to slide 6, which is just a summary of these. And before I get into this, we also tested the U.S. Department of Agriculture. USDA provides funding. While we didn't get into the details with them, we are working on 2 different transactions for other communities, the town of Red River and the village of Tallahassee Valley, and their interest rates were well over 3%. So we just, given where these interest rates had come in, we just didn't consider the USDA to sort of put together an option here for you, just knowing that their pricing would be, from an interest rate perspective, substantially higher. So having said that, so there's really 4 options there for you. We just didn't show the USDA option. So slide 6 is a summary. The top one is the NMFA deal, which you can see there, 25-year. Their interest rate all in is 1.93%. So for 25 years, they're willing to lend you money at 1.93%. And just to give you the bottom line, I'm recommending that you take that option because the pricing is well below market. Currently, for AAA rated, the best rated credit on a 30-year deal, the best they're going to see is about 3.25, and so you're well below that in that scenario. The cost for this transaction, you have to pay the finance authority roughly $17,000, just shy of that, and then for our fee and for the attorneys, which will not change on any of these scenarios, it's a total of $60,000. So all in, the total project here, you would be borrowing $2.185 million from the finance authority. Your total repayment back to them would be $2.737 million. And then there's just some other minor details there, which I already mentioned, the $500,000 at 0.1%. This has a call option. In other words, if you chose to want to refinance this because of any reason after 10 years, you could do that with the finance authority with no prepayment penalty, no penalty at all. So it might be a scenario where you wanted to add on to the facility or do some other infrastructure investments on behalf of law enforcement, and you just wanted to restructure that debt so you just had one debt. So you'd have the ability to do that after 10 years. BBVA Compass, number 2, is the second best option, and I certainly am not recommending against this one. The pricing is very similar to the finance authority, and it does give you the flexibility the commissioners had mentioned in the prior meeting, although there is the risk that you will have to refinance that, and in 5 years or in 10 years, we just don't know what the world will look like and where interest rates will be. However, from a flexibility standpoint, BBVA Compass option number 2 is very strong. And again, the cost here, $65,000. The reason it went up by $5,000 is because BBVA Compass would require their counsel to come in and look over all the documents for you. So that's very similar to BBVA Compass 1. Again, the only differences there are BBVA option 2 is a 5-year payoff, and option 1 is a 10-year payoff. And then you see Bank of Albuquerque, what their structure looks like. Again, they were willing to provide the Tier C some early payoffs. So on the far right-hand corner, if you chose a 7-year call, they would increase the interest rate to 2.67% from 2.58%. And if you chose a shorter call than that, a 5-year, it would be 2.73%. And then finally, the public offering, which we're not recommending. It's expensive for this size of a project. We're just providing the detail there for you. The public offering would require you to get a bond rating, which City of Tier C currently does not have. So there is benefit to getting a bond rating. So if the commission did have that interest, I would certainly probably change my recommendation to doing the public offering, even though it is more costly. But there is value to having a bond rating for the community. Mayor and members of the commission, I'll stop there and answer any questions you might have. And again, just to reiterate, I would be recommending that you would adopt, and not at this meeting, of course, but adopt the NMFA option. I think it's the lowest interest cost to provide you the most flexibility relative to the other options.
Okay, thank you. Questions, concerns, ideas? Why am I looking to my right?
You're just rolling out here, aren't you? Okay, so I agree with you. It's either NMFA or BBVA. I mean, that's definite as a no-go. And if there's a 10-year call on NMFA, and we have, and I haven't been able to calculate this out fast enough, but at 10 years, do you know off the top of your head what that call would be if we were to go out and refi? Like, you wouldn't want to refi 1.93, but if we did decide to do that, or if our police department ends up, having extra funding that we could prepay part of that at that 10-year period, do you know what that balance is in 10 years?
It would be very similar to the BBVA Compass number 10, so it'd be roughly $1.5 million principal outstanding at that point.
Okay, so we would have paid off about $500,000 in the 10-year period. That's the only question I have.
Okay. And actually, Commissioner Clark, to your point, I know that our GRT was a little bit spiked because of the Alzheimer build-out, and it really didn't give us a true picture of where we are with GRT, but hopefully over the next 10 years, it will be, we will work to make it increased without relying on building projects specifically, and which would give the police department more flexibility, to your point, on what they might want to do at that particular point.
Well, then I have a couple of other thoughts then. Manager Fuentes pulled up the actual ordinance where the tax money comes from for the police department that's going to pay for this loan. And I just wondered if you wouldn't mind, Manager, to put that up there, if you don't mind, so that we can all see that the monies that are coming in off the gross receipts, and it is just designated for public safety. I would misunderstood to think that it was for equipment and personnel. So this, I wanted to make certain that was public record for everybody and all of the commissioners to see that it in fact is for public safety. And it's about $250,000 a year coming out of that 0.25%. Is that correct, Manager Fuentes?
That's correct.
So we're really not taxing the police department too much. You'll still have that extra $100,000 a year, so that to do the equipment and the personnel and the things that you need to.
Yes, ma'am. We sat down with the finance director and myself, and we went over the numbers, not going back just 1 year, but several years back, and came up with a number, a budget that we could comfortably say we had a bad year, and we could still meet the demands, meet our obligations with this funding, and still have the money to keep operations going. The police department. I want to add that
we have been very fiscally responsible as a police department. Last year, our fiscal budget was below the baseline budget. We have reduced expenditures over 6.6% overall. We have gone to everything from scheduling to what our needs assessment are, equipment, asset management, and it has really allowed us to improve those numbers, and we're going to continue on that track as well.
And one of the other things I wanted to reiterate is that my understanding is we're running into a deadline by having the animal shelter built, right? Chief, stop.
Yes.
But we're in a deadline, aren't we? So we really don't have a lot of time to play with this. And the other thing is that with this new complex, what I remember seeing is a lot of animal control going in, code enforcement going in, so there'll be a consolidation of some of the services in the city. So when you're talking about 40 personnel in there, it's not all just police department, it's other parts of the city that will be in there working with you that are currently housed in different locations.
We're going to implement some programs that are much needed and services that are much needed in the community we physically don't have the space to do now. Crime prevention, youth services, and police activities lead. Those will all be things that are incorporated into that new building, all with measurable goals and results within a 5 to 7 year span, because we're going to really be targeting our youth at the elementary school age, and then transition with them as they go into middle school. We want to reduce the crime rate. We want to reduce the issue of where they just keep repeating the behavior and conduct. We want to give parents the tools in a nonviolent manner to assist them with dealing with children to demonstrate self-destructive behavior. I've had this program before. It works. I stand behind it. There are grants out there to assist us with that, and we're in the process of looking for those diversionary grants now.
And two other comments. Thank you, Chief. One is I know that there is not enough space for the police department to safely store records and also evidence. So I think that's a critical issue, correct?
Yes.
So that being said, I would love to see my police department get out of the bathhouse and get out of the crematorium business and go into the police business. So those are my comments.
Those were strong comments.
That's why we have the bathhouse, Mayor Pro Tem.
And the crematory.
Any other comments? If there are no other comments, this is probably 3 years in the making. I don't know how many, probably, if you accumulate all the hours of staff that has been invested to get us at this particular point, it's in the thousands, absolutely in the thousands. So I just want to thank everyone for due diligence, seeing the need, supporting the need, finding the money to build out the project, and that's coming out of the police department's budget. So I just want to personally thank, and I think I can speak for the rest of the commission, thank our police department and our staff. This has been a long, hard fought battle to get us to this day, and hopefully the sun will shine in about 1.5 minutes. So with that said, Manager Fuentes, do you have any remarks you want to say? Others, I'm going to call for a vote.
I guess just one unrelated question, Mark, because the interest rate is so attractive right now with NMFA. You think that percentage is there for other refinancing in our projects? I mean, refinance.
Go for it.
We need storm drainage and we need roads.
Did you see me just hit him?
Go for it.
All right, let's go through this one first then.
I'm happy to always look at those opportunities. Absolutely. I would say, so you're not taking necessarily any action other than giving sort of the direction to staff to move forward, and of course to me. What would happen with your approval to go forward here is we would have the notice of publication, for, the 2-week notice, and then we'd come back on September 13th, I believe, for the actual official adoption of the final terms. Okay. And then thereafter, we would close 30 days thereafter. You'll have cash, roughly in the mid-October for construction and renovation.
Excellent. Excellent. All right, I will stand for a motion.
Mayor, I'll make that motion that we go for the
Absolutely.
funding option for the law enforcement complex and direct staff to look at NMFA first, since that's already been approved. And if there is something that happens to fall through the cracks, then BBDA Compass 2 would be my second choice.
Okay, I have a motion. Thank you, Commissioner Clark. I need a second.
I second.
I have a
motion.
second by Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Carries unanimously. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Force. We're going to get it done. Great. Next item is discussion action, Impact Fee Board recommendation for reimbursement of fees. Arnie Castaneda, Water, Wastewater Supervisor.
Good morning, Mayor.
Maybe just want to wait for 1 second, so we have your undivided attention.
Oh, yeah. Let's see. You gonna use the laser? Just,
Okay.
right there.
Mayor, I'm going to probably have to leave in about 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay, just whenever you have to go, you go. Understood. Thank you for that heads up. Arnie, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor and members of the commission. In front of you for consideration and action this morning is a request for reimbursement of the impact fees into the water and or wastewater budget. I have a short presentation, and can we blow that up a little bit?
A little bit more.
I can't see. I can't read. Okay, so we've been working on our wastewater upgrades, phase one. The wastewater treatment plant has got a new belt filter press, new aerators, ultraviolet system, SCADA upgrades. The laboratory has been upgraded, and as well as the administration building. So that is going on as we speak.
That's just for, so you can use the laser if you want to point it.
Oh, okay.
I'll switch the slides on you, because it's not a PowerPoint.
All right, so, the wastewater upgrades, phase one, total improvements were $3.5 million. $900,000 came from the city in matching funds. The project is close to completion and should be, closed out by, here in the next couple of months. It's June up there, but that was back then. We still got a little nicks and knacks, still pending. Wastewater upgrades phase two, the excavation and construction of the 255-foot diameter clarifiers is underway. New splitter blocks will be also installed, equipment will be put in the clarifiers, and this is phase two, and this project has just begun. The lowest bid came in from Smithco in the amount of $1.88 million. At the recommendation of Smith Engineering, the project was awarded to Smithco, the apparent low bidder. However, due to a mathematical error in Smith Engineering's spreadsheet, the bid exceeded the amount by $335,000. According to our records, the city currently has $302,000 in impact fees funds that qualify for reimbursement back into the water wastewater budgets. The water wastewater budget fronted up the funds to pay for the projects listed in the next slide, which will be coming up. Go ahead. And so this is the list of projects that back a couple of years ago was compiled. Out of this list, there is, they originally were highlighted green, doesn't show up here, but Out of this list, there is some projects that qualify for reimbursement. So what we're asking for right now is reimbursement of those funds up to the $302,000, so that the wastewater budget can handle the shortfall in the wastewater Phase 2 project. So currently, we are using some of the operating money to pay for the smaller projects that are in the red, and so we would like to get that reimbursed so that we can pay for those and use some of that money for repairs and construction of our existing equipment. We have lift stations, one that just recently broke the motor up at the North Gate by the Denny's, I think, the restaurant is. So that cost in itself $5,000. We had 2 valves at the treatment plant that were corroded and old, and we had to replace those recently at $5,000 a piece. So everything that we do in water and wastewater, obviously it's costly. It's coming out of the operating budget, and so what we're asking is reimbursement as impact fees, so that we can alleviate some of the problems that are presently existing, and to help with that shortfall in the wastewater Phase 2 project. I stand for any questions, if I can answer them.
Thank you. Questions, concerns? Commissioner Clark.
Okay, what's the legal question? We're back to the impact fee issue and the ordinance that established the impact fees back in 2006. My understanding, and having read that, is that those impact fees were supposed to be each one put in a separate account.
Commissioner Clark, could you kind of...
Put into a separate account. And I know that there's an issue with also, something's been filed against the city based on the impact fees, and I want to put every single dollar into water and water delivery and wastewater, so don't get me wrong on that one. You're going to have my first vote, wherever we can find the money. I'm just concerned about whether we can really honestly, at this particular moment, use that impact fee unless we've got some real clarification on the fact that the city may or may not have properly dealt with those funds, and it has nothing to do with our manager because he inherited this issue. This was something that was done prior to his time. So that being said, I'm throwing it out to legal for that, for us, because I don't want us to make a bad decision.
Commissioner Clark, Mayor, Commissioners, we have looked into this in great detail. In fact, the chart that Mr. Castaneda showed you in the previous slide was created in our office. The status of the development fees right now is that your staff has gone through and worked diligently to get them in the situation they are supposed to be in, each assigned as an individual account reflecting the entity that made the original payments. That work has been done, and those accounts do now exist. To follow up on your comment about legal action, yes, there is a pending case right now, Ashbaugh Construction Company versus City of Truth or Consequences. Ashbaugh Construction Company is seeking reimbursement of development fees in an amount not yet determined, but it can't be more than about $20,000 or $30,000, frankly, for properties that they paid development fees on and that the construction company still owns. We believe that suit is without merit. We are defending it, but it is pending. The refund, basically refunds would go to the person that paid the fees only if it can be shown that the money was misappropriated, misspent, and they're not getting service. Those properties, as best we can tell, have been getting service since the day they were built. Now, discovery has yet to be done, however. The status right now is we did not oppose a request by the plaintiff, Ashbaugh Construction, to file an amended complaint. That's fairly common in suits like this, and the rules are that leave to file an amended complaint will normally be granted, so we didn't oppose. There was no reason to do that. Our answer to the amended complaint is due Friday. And it's, as I told the attorney for Ashbaugh Construction a couple of days ago, he asked why I hadn't filed it yet. I said, well, it's not due until Friday, and in order to respond to a couple of your allegations, I need to find out what the commission does Wednesday morning. So, other than that, it's 90% written. And then we'll see how that litigation proceeds. But again, that's a very, very small piece because it's only properties that were originally built, developed by Ashbaugh Construction and are still in their ownership. Because assuming, which I don't agree with, okay, but assuming that there were an obligation to refund any of these fees, you can only refund them to the actual owner of the property. Now, let me just observe that this comes to you on a recommendation for approval by your impact fees board, which is generally common membership with your utilities board. But it's technically a separate board. They are obligated to give you advice on your capital improvements plan and your land use assumptions. And they are recommending that this transfer be made. These impact fees have just been sitting there for, in some cases, many, many years. They're not being used. Meanwhile, allowable capital items have been paid for out of your water and wastewater operating budgets. We went through, we looked at the city's capital improvements plan, which I will readily admit is old. It's due for update. We have told the Capital Improvements Advisory Committee they should look at it, and I understand they will be. But we looked at what was in your capital improvements plan, and we compared it with actual expenses. And in that spreadsheet you see up there, there's a column that says yes and no. And if it says yes, we looked at it and we said that is an allowable expense for a capital improvement that increased the capacity of your system, because that's what's required for impact fees. You have to be increasing the capacity of your system, not just replacing. Sorry, Arnie, you can't just be replacing something that broke, you know, or even enhancing quality. But we looked very carefully at what was allowed, what was not allowed. I regret to say that the city spent something like $1.3 million on a water tank upgrade. Unfortunately, your capital improvements plan estimated that at $100,000. All you can use is $100,000. But we'll see what happens in your amended capital improvements plan when that comes forward to you from your advisory committee. So the amount that is being requested for transfer into the operating budget, as best we can tell, is fully consistent with the original capital improvements plan and you know, and the Development Fees Act that you have to comply with, and which, frankly, you have largely the State Development Fees Act has also been incorporated as part of your municipal code. so I will stand for any questions after that long dissertation.
I think Manager Fuentes has a shorter question.
Shorter question? Who said I was finished?
John, just for if the commissioners consider the impact fee board recommendation of reimbursement, and you talked about the potential, the disputed amount being between $20,000 and $30,000. So then, would the commissioners then be able to, for example, say, let's approve the reimbursement, but let's set aside that 2030 until this litigation is resolved?
You could do that if you wish, but the amount is small enough that I think, frankly, it could be found in your budget somewhere if we did lose the case for some reason.
Well, not our water wastewater.
I saw Melissa going,
I believe actually there will be some amount left in the development fees accounts after this transfer, will there not?
And the reason, John, for that, just because since we are talking about impact fees and some people want to identify the impact fees, so it potentially, yes, the commissioners could do that. Okay.
Could we come back and just release that 20 or 30 at the end of your project if we needed it, and maybe that by that time this litigation will be completed?
I would hope the litigation will be completed well before that, yes.
So it might not sound a bad idea, actually.
And actually, correct me if I'm mistaken, Manager Fuentes, but I thought I saw an email that you sent out in relationship to this, or someone sent out, that the lion's share of this $302,000 is from the Alzheimer. It's almost over $250,000 or something like that.
Well, it's
So
$200,000.
It was $200,000. So I agree with Attorney Appel. I think we're on safe grounds here, giving that money out. I do have a question. Does Smith Engineering have errors and omissions? I mean, this burns my eyebrows. We did nothing wrong, and we're getting nailed for $335,237.89. If they have, I'm hoping that we require them, an engineering company who were abiding by what they tell us in their numbers, that if they have an errors and omissions policy, why aren't we suing them to get the money for Arnie? And then we'd have another $300,000.
You know, it's not our fault that they made a math mistake.
I understand. I mean, Attorney Rubin or Attorney Appel, do we know, does Smith Engineering have a errors and omissions policy that we could go after them?
I do not remember all the details. We looked into that, about a year ago now, I think. And unfortunately, the circumstances and their contract, which the city had approved some years back, basically let them off the hook because the error occurred, I remember the details more or less, the error occurred in the process of coming up with an amended estimate. And that amended estimate was actually approved by the city, who at the time did not catch the fact that Smith Engineering had made a little $300,000 error in their arithmetic. But they had clauses in their contract that basically said they were not liable for not knowing how to add numbers.
The commissioners.
Once the city had approved it, the city was stuck.
Got it.
And let me add, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I think, in that case, I can tell you we have used it when Smith Engineering has come back to us and said, well, we can do this additional work, but it's going to cost a little bit more. We have taken that and said, no, we're not going to pay any more because we had this issue with them. Okay. And I believe just recently, in one of our USDA applications, which they are unfortunately, they are the engineers on record on the application that needed some additional work to meet USDA application guidelines, they had to do it without charge.
Got it.
So you're getting some of that
So
back?
we're getting some of that
We're
back.
trying, yes.
Right.
Mayor, can you
Okay.
excuse me?
I understand. Sure, thank you. Do you want, does anyone else have to say anything? Because we can have a motion if you want to vote on this right now.
Oh, sure.
Commissioner Carr.
Sure.
All right, I will stand for a motion, please.
for approval of the, what Arnie is asking for, transfer of the $300,000 out of the pot of money that we have from the impact fee, or any portion of that anyone would like to make a motion on.
Mayor, I kind of like Manager Fuentes' idea of transferring all but 30,000 out and bring it back to us with that 30,000 that Artie's going to need at the end of his project.
So your motion would be to, however much is transferred, 30,000 would remain in the impact fees accounts.
Okay, so I have a motion.
Thank you for clarifying my words.
I have a motion by
I
Commissioner
second
Pot,
that
I have a
motion.
second by Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Carries unanimously. Thank you, Arnie.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you,
we
guys.
appreciate it. Thank you. The next item under new business, number 4, discussion acquisition of property at the TRC Airport. Manager Fuentes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Commissioners, at the municipal airport, there is a mobile home that has been there for probably over 20 years. And the property owner that was there, the gentleman passed away since. He was originally allowed to move in the mobile home and be used as a security place. He would oversee the airport, and but about maybe 5-6 years ago, he passed away. His wife is still living in the mobile home. However, she is elderly. She recently had an accident, and her family came down and decided, no, we need to relocate her closer to family. So there's this mobile home with some additions to it that they're asking the city for consideration of purchasing that. It is on city TRC airport property, so we have an offer to the city for purchasing of the mobile home, which could be repurposed for airport use, whether it's as a kind of housing for somebody, an airport attendant in the future, pilot's lounge, or different ideas. Obviously, we can have that discussion at a later date should the commissioner approve this. So the offer to the city is for about $17,000. They did an estimate of all of the, not only the mobile home, but the additions that they did, because they have a storage shed and they have a patio that they built onto it. So if the commissioners are interested, then we can certainly authorize staff to proceed with negotiations with the owners for the purchase of the mobile home. And with that, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I will stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions, concerns?
Manager Fuentes, in addition to the purchase price, is there any work that needs to be done to the structure or structures to make them inhabitable, or?
Mr. Mayor, Commissioner Heschler, no, not that I can see. I mean, the lady who has been living there, I believe her name is Susie Johnson, she has kept it really in good condition. She's been living there ever since her husband passed away. So there's no visible signs of immediate repair. I mean, she's been maintaining it. She maintains the property. It's in good condition. And the addition that she made on the patio, it's in good condition. It has a propane heater, so it has services there. So there's nothing there that we would have to have immediate repairs unless we decide to remodel it in any way.
Do you envision on-site management staying there?
Mr. Mayor, Commissioner Heschler, I don't know if it would be management. Again, depending on the facility, we certainly, if the commissioners decide to authorize us to acquire it, and we do, then we can kind of have those discussions with the Airport Advisory Board and see what would be the best use of this mobile home. I mean, it is in good condition. It is already established there. So it really lends itself to having it used for a wide range of potential uses, whether it's for management or for any other pilot's lounge or whatever the case may be.
And if there isn't if you are able to reach an agreement, you are going to bring it back to the commission anyway for approval.
That's correct.
What we talked about, yes. Okay.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Sure, Commissioner Frankel?
The other utilities to the property besides the propane, does it have a well? Does it have a septic tank? Is it running on its own system there, or is it tied into the airport?
Mr. Mayor, Commissioner Frankel, the property does have a well. It is using the airport's septic tank. It has power provided by Sierra Electric Co-op, has its own meter, and has its own propane account.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll give this in my commissioner's report, but I was down in Las Cruces yesterday with Virgin Galactic, delivering some information. Had a wonderful conversation, and there might be a possibility, since this is 2 bedrooms, of us renting this to 2 of their employees, so we make this an income-producing piece of property, because they're going to have their planes at our airport.
That's correct.
So some of the planes, so that's another possibility that we discussed actually yesterday. All right, any further questions? So I'll need a motion to authorize staff to proceed with negotiations in trying to secure the mobile home that is located at our airport.
I so move on what Mayor Green just said.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead. I need a second. Second. I have a second by Commissioner Hessler. Is there any further discussion? Seeing
I
none.
would just say that in these negotiations that we tried to get the best possible price below 17,000.
Absolutely agreed, and I have seen staff do some really strong negotiations, Commissioner Frankel, so I can assure you that they're going to do the best for all of us. So anything else? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, carries unanimously. Thank you. The next item is number 6, because we have moved it. Discussion action, appointment of an alternate to serve on the Joint Powers Commission in the event the appointed member cannot attend. I asked this to be put on the agenda. As you know, these are very critical times as we move forward in the development of our new hospital. And since we own 40% of that hospital and 40% of the debt of that hospital, I think it's very important that the 3 appointees of the commission be able to attend at all times. However, that said, life happens, as they say, and Commissioner Clark in the past has volunteered to be the alternate for Mayor Pro Tem. I believe at that time it was Mayor Whitehead. And I thought that she has now been going to some of the meetings, has met with the CFO, Steve Stewart, at the hospital, has worked with Manager Fuentes to get a better understanding of where we are with the hospital, and I am seeking the commission's approval to expand the scope of Commissioner Clark's responsibility to be the alternate for not only Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead, but also the alternate for Commissioner Hessler and the alternate for myself as well. So we will always have 3 people there at the JPC to vote, and I believe that Commissioner Clark has done herself and this commission proud by hitting the ground running and delving into the business aspect of the hospital that she has a real good understanding of. So that is why I put this on the agenda. If there is no heartburn from my fellow commissioners, I will stand for a motion, please.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to move for the approval of the appointment of an alternate, namely Commissioner Kathy Clark, to serve on the Joint Powers Commission in the event the appointed member cannot attend.
Okay, so I have a motion. I need a second.
Second.
I have a tie for a second. So Clerk Canton, you can decide who you want. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you for your support. And the last item is discussion action, Holloman Air Force Base Environmental Impact Study for F-16s. We received, theoretically, a letter December of 2016, which we never got. And I actually have spoken to Holloman, and I spoke to Mr. Gomelak, and there was just a mess. The left hand didn't know what the right hand is doing, and the left hand thought the right hand was mailing something out. So we got something like literally this thick in July. And basically, what I have handed out, and I don't know if you have that, is the area where they are going to be flying. Do you have that, Mayor Pro Tem? This one? Okay. And it's over the lake, it's over the dam, it's at 500 miles an hour, as the crow flies, or as the F-16 flies, they would literally be over our hospital, our assisted living home, and our nursing home within 3 to 4 seconds. If you look at I'm not going to bore you with the details, because I bored myself one weekend, but they contradict themselves all the time. However, potential for noise level to vary briefly may occur during specific training maneuvers or exercises such as sonic booms, but it's above 25,000 feet. That's on one page. On another page, they talk about flying at 500 feet over the lake. You'll experience noise levels from an F-16 in flight at or above 500 feet AGL, which I'm assuming stands for above ground level. So they've contradicted themselves there. Here's one. Airspace use only typically be from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., but then at the bottom, however, the need to meet required training timelines may increase the percentage of training operations occurring past 10 p.m. And the one that grabbed me was this one. Based on the information presented, specific avoidance measures may include limited nighttime flights, limited flights above 3,000 feet near Elephant Butte Reservoir at all times of the year. But if you take a look at the map that is included in their proposal, it's not near Elephant Butte Reservoir. It's over the reservoir. So my concern is a couple things, and in full disclosure, I was contacted by the lawyer from the Turner Foundation, who, as you all know, we have worked with on other projects here in the city. My concern is this. We have the Sierra Grande, which is selling tours on the Armendariz Ranch. There's bison. There are the bats. We have Geronimo Springs Museum, which uses the tours, their own tours, on the Armendariz Ranch as a fundraiser. They charge, I think, $100, $150 per person to go out there to take a look at this amazing, if you haven't seen it, it's 500,000 bats come out of a cave, just truly amazing. So it's kind of like they contradict themselves. I think it's incumbent upon the commission to support local businesses that are doing business on the Armendariz Ranch and having access to that ranch to sell environmental tours and as a fundraiser for the museum. I am concerned with how close it is to 3 very vulnerable buildings, our hospital, our assisted living, and our nursing home, which is something like, I think, I tried to do the math, it's like 2.5 seconds. If you go over that red line, you're right over the hospital. I would just like my fellow commissioners to consider sending Holloman Air Force Base a letter of concern. And this was brought up by Clerk Canton in our agenda meeting yesterday, coming from the Alamogordo area, that obviously we want to support training for our men and women in the armed forces for their preparedness. That is not the issue. White Sands Missile Range is a humongous piece of property. Why are they flying over the east end of the lake? Why are they flying within 2 seconds at 500 miles an hour from our hospital and our other assets? That's the thing that kind of grabs me, and I thought that I wanted to bring it to the commission because I think we have till August 31st to send a letter of concerns, August 25th, excuse me, to send a letter of concern. And so I just want to hear from my fellow commissioners, do you think this is as important to support 2 existing businesses
in town, and also the health, environmental issue that this could potentially, with the sonic boom coming over an assisted living home, where you have people who are at the worst stages of their life, frightened and scared, and you have no warning. It's not like you can go into a room and say, by the way, you're going to hear a boom in 5 minutes. It just comes on you. So I wanted your opinions and seek your advice on this. So I'm open to discussion.
Mayor, I'll ask a question. I've had the same discussion with some of these folks. Is there any possible benefit to this community or our communities in the form of increased fuel sales at our airport, flying the Air Force Base to fly over?
I asked that question, sir, and I was given that our runway is not long enough for an F-16, because in training you have newer pilots who might not hit the end of the runway where they're supposed to come in, and those puppies cost a few bucks if they're buried in the sand. So that was one of my first things. Oh, here's an opportunity, and I like the way your mind works, to sell more, and I was...
Well, in the absence of any economic benefit, then we're putting our neighbors in detriment of some sort, in my opinion. So I would not be in support of this at this time.
And I think all I'm really asking for is authorization for staff to write a letter of concern that it is over a major asset of our community. Now, maybe the people going to Elephant View Lake, maybe they'd love to see the F-16s fly by. I mean, I don't know. You know, maybe the first time might be great. I had F-15s fly over Paula and myself when we were kayaking on the lake in the winter, when we were living on the refuge, and came down to recreate. And boy, I'll tell you, before you, I could actually see the pilot's face, and then they were gone, and then boom, and I'm telling you, we levitated in those little kayaks, scared to live in.
Mr. Mayor, excuse me, we just had, not too long ago, concerns about the helicopter coming in and out from, Sierra Vista Hospital, transporting out patients or bringing in medications. So, if there was a concern with that noise, what's going to happen with this noise? And how often are they going to fly over? Is it going to be, once a month, once every 2 weeks? I mean, what is the impact of the noise?
22,000 sorties a year. Now, that's one plane, evidently, because I asked for that. I said 22,000, evidently. So if they're flying 8 in a formation of 8 planes, that's 8 sorties. So that's 8. So and these men and women, they have to be trained. That's not my issue. My issue is why in our backyard? I mean, why right over here? And to your point, Mayor Pro Tem, we are moving the helicopter pad to the back of the hospital to address the concerns that you had and some other residents had. So you're absolutely right. So I'll stand for a motion. It's getting late. If anyone wants to make a motion.
I would have one concern I'd like to add to that as well, would be maybe a little far-fetched, and hopefully it never won't happen, but the safety of the dam. Should an accident occur or sonic booms, 20,000 sonic booms a year might cause cracks or fractures or any kind of damage to a 100-year-old dam, could affect everyone downstream.
Well, also, and to that point, which I forgot, in this document, they talk about releasing something called, maybe I'm not pronouncing it right, chaff. And what that is, it's magnesium strips that actually, they light up. And they supposedly will burn out by the time they hit the ground. I don't know. There's nothing that says what's the altitude when they light this chaff up. Obviously, it must be for training for some legitimate good reason. But, I don't know. I would just wish they would take this whole triangle and move it 10 miles to the east, and it would be a non-issue. I mean, White Missile Sands is the largest controlled airspace in America, and why it has to be over our town and over our lake, I don't quite understand. So,
Mr. Mayor, on that account, I would like to move that we authorize staff to send a letter to Holloman Air Force Base addressing our concerns for this occurring over our lake and town.
Thank you. I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead. I need a second.
Second.
I have a second by Commissioner Heschler. Is there any further discussion? Seeing, Jay, I can give you some of the information out of this.
Sure, yeah.
If you need it.
Okay.
If you need it.
I'm happy to look at the letter of concern before it goes out if you need me to, so, okay.
Thank you for that. So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Carries unanimously. Thank you very much. And, so, report, City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be very brief. Just to let you all know that we are in the process of finalizing the hire for the tourism event coordinator, which will be starting hopefully soon. With that, I did receive notice that some of our larger tax members will now be seeking reappointment, which provides us a great opportunity to revamp that board along with the tourism event coordinator. So we'll be working, once that person is on board, to come back and kind of revamp how we proceed forward with lodgers tax as well as the tourism marketing for the city. We do have an upcoming event. The Legislative Finance Committee will be meeting here on September 27th and 29th. We tried to find, at the Civic Center, we tried to find an alternate location. However, it was already occupied at the Lions Event Center. So that brings an interesting point, Commissioner Knott, that commissioners have approved us moving forward with the Police Department building. And that is, just as a thought, that we might want to consider repurposing the PD building, moving our commission chambers closer to downtown, which this could be converted into additional space for the seniors' activities. I think the space is long enough to accommodate, the badminton and the shuffleboard and line dancing and so forth. So just as a food for thought there. And with that, commissioners, again, just a reminder, next week, Chief Alitas, Renee, myself will be attending the New Mexico Municipal League Annual Conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Rubin.
I have no report, thank you.
Okay. Attorney Appel, as long as you're here, do you have any words?
Nothing further. I was telling Jay, as a former air traffic controller who worked a lot of F-16s out of Luke Air Force Base a long time ago, if you want me to take a look at that letter, I'd be glad to.
Thank you.
That might be
helped with some of these military areas before.
That might be more helpful than me doing it, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Mayor Pro Tem.
No report.
Commissioner Heschel. No report. I'll be quick. You gotta love it. I love when nice things appear above the fold in a newspaper. Junior lifeguard prevents drowning at city pool. It was a 4-year-older who decided to go swimming, even with a life jacket, and goes running down the pool and jumps in the pool. Someone forgot to tell him that to breathe, you have to have your face up out of the water, and he kept his face in the water, and this young man, Eli Wilcox, 11 years old, jumped in the water and actually saved this young person. So congratulations. And that was from the Sentinel and from the Herald, to be fair to both newspapers. Hot Springs High School in Biathon team, 3rd place at Nationals. I mean, the dignity that these students bring to themselves, their family, and to our community as ambassadors back in Virginia. The name of Truth or Consequences is being bandied around, so congratulations to all of them. I had mentioned that Tracy did a great job, I thought, at the workshop with NMDO2 representing the city. And yesterday, we delivered 40 relocation packages to Virgin Galactic and had a wonderful meeting with that individual who is in charge of it. And Sandy, I think you know the woman because she mentioned you in the last email. That you know, Sandy. We have offered them FAM tours utilizing staff, myself, any other commissioner who wants to do it. A realtor will show you a house. A city commissioner or a city manager will show you where you're going to live. And I think that's just important. And I would like to say that we got a wonderful email from the woman who I had the meeting with yesterday. All Las Cruces did was send a 3-line note and direct them to a website. And so I want to thank
my commissioners, my staff, and on Monday, my staff was Clerk Canton, Angela Torres, and Priscilla Fuentes, and myself. We put together 40 location packages that I think really showed who we are and what we are and why you should consider living in Truth or Consequences and Sierra County. Wherever they live, if it's going to be in Sierra County, we will eventually, they'll be shopping here, and we'll get a piece of their paycheck. But the minimum salaries are $65,000 and up, and it's 40 families. We have a gentleman actually today who has played the golf course in Elephant Butte once before. He is up playing again today, and I think that he will be playing it a lot on his time off up here. So with that said, I want to thank everyone who had a hand in doing this. We can't fight big cities dollar for dollar, but damn it, we can outsmart them. And I think we just did with these relocation packages, if you read the email that Lori sent back to us. So thank you very much, and see you at the next city commission meeting. Have a great day.
I move to adjourn.
Thank you. Second.